The East Penn School District Board of School Directors will hereby come to order. Please rise and join me in saluting the flag. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have a number of requests to address the board tonight. Apparently all dealing with 7th Generations Charter School. We'll start with Ms. Susan File of Macungie.
Good evening, everyone. As you probably know, I'm the current director of 7th Generations Charter School, and I came here simply tonight to thank you again for everything you're doing for the students of East Penn. Thanks to Dr. Seidenberger for the due diligence he's doing and holding us accountable for everything we're supposed to be doing. And we are really hoping that next month we will be on the agenda. You know, we sent our letter, I believe it was September 1st, asking for a renewal, so we're very excited about this process coming to a successful close very soon. And through the whole thing, we've been doing our best to understand your concerns. And today I heard that, you know, we have a lot of history in 3 years, or the 5 years it took to get the school where it is today. There was a concern that the school would serve more students from outside of East Penn than inside. So I got those figures for you. And last year, 48% of our students were East Penn students, and going forward to next year, we have 50% of our students enrolled are from East Penn. So I thought that might be interesting for you to know. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to call me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. File. The next person I have is Ms. Lisa Nyan of Allentown.
And my mailing address is in West Coastville, so I am a resident of East Penn School District. My name is Lisa Nyan. I am a software engineer and a parent of 3 children. One goes to Emmaus High School, one is at LMMS, and the third is at 7th Generation. And I came before you 3 years ago to explain why I felt that creating a charter school with 7 Gen's focus was important. At that time, while I loved the environmental component of 7 Generations' mission, I was also driven by the experiential learning and out-of-the-box thinking aspects that are a cornerstone of the school's mission. It is this that I focused on when I spoke 3 years ago. I felt then, and still feel now, that it is important for children to experience what they are learning and to ask why things are as they are. A school that has hands-on learning and big thinking at the core of its mission, day after day and year after year, surely will result in young adults ready to solve big problems. They will have invented more things in their school years than most people do in a lifetime. They will be ready to help America reclaim the innovator status that helped to build this great nation. So this was my dream for 7 Generations. After 3 years, I am thrilled to say that 7 Gen is on the right track, and I believe my expectations will continue to be met. My 3rd grader has solved multiple problems with his inventions. His understanding of the community and world around him are deep, because he has learned concepts and then gone into the community to apply them. For example, while studying the U.S. government this year, in order to cement the concept and role of the 3 branches of government, his class met each branch of government in the community. He has inventions that range from ways to save his hole-ridden pants, and also from keeping our dog from jumping over our fence. His 1st grade class went through the process with the Emmaus Borough to get a sign posted by the town to help protect it. So it is my hope that with the support of the East Penn School District, 7 Gen can continue to flourish. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nyan. The next person I have is Gina Badalati, I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, of Macungie.
Thank you. It's Badali. My daughters attend 7 Generations Charter School, and my firsthand experience with the directors, teachers, aides, therapists, and administration is that they care about seeing all children succeed, no matter what level that they are at. They teach our kids academics in exciting, engaging, and creative ways, and they teach them not just to foster relationships, but to engage in teamwork, to look out for one another, and they groom them for life in the real world. This is of real concern to me because, you see, my children are disabled. Working with the staff at 7 Generations, my girls, in my opinion, have accomplished great things. Amelia, who has Down syndrome and a speech disability, is learning to communicate more and more every day. She has responsibilities in the classroom and is a contributing member of her class. She has lots of friends, does well in science and social studies, and is progressing daily in reading, writing, and math. I never have trouble getting her off to school in the morning because it's a joy for her to be with her peers as she works hard with her team to learn new things and master the rest. My daughter in kindergarten, Zoe, has autism and sensory processing disorder, yet she can now play alongside other children, participate in morning meetings, even school-wide ones, and even has children she gravitates towards, a basis to start having friends, even though she is still mostly non-vocal. Her integration into 7 Gen's daily routine has helped her progress socially, and her behavior, even at home, is improving by leaps and bounds. Academically, she's already learning first-grade sight words and beginning to speak a lot more. 7 Generations has been a blessing to our family because they've embraced our children, worked hard with us to help them succeed, and listened to us while all the staff has shared their expertise in helping us to train our kids to grow into vital, productive members of society. That's one of the key things a special needs like mom, like myself, wants. The best chance for my kids to live on their own, and I feel they are off to a great start with 7 Generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Badali. Next person I have is Peter Schmidt of also of Allentown.
Hello. I am not an East Penn resident. My son has been a student at 7 Gen for 3 years since the beginning. And in my business capacity as an SAT prep person, I worked with hundreds of kids from East Penn, so I have a fairly good idea, how kids are doing in various school districts around the area, what they're lacking, and what they do well. Your kids are, amongst the top of my kids, but just like a lot of kids nowadays, there's sometimes, they come to me, there's a lack of excitement about their education. Sometimes even a lack of basic skills. Emmaus does better than most, but some people fall through the cracks. At 7 Gen, that doesn't really happen, at least so far as I've seen. My son is an unusual kid. When he was 3, he asked Santa for a periodic table. But he's also got some other issues which don't make him that easy to deal with in regular school. I don't know where we'd be without 7 Gen. In my son's class, they accommodate him. He's been able to work in Algebra 2 with his teacher while their kids are doing math. He has a math specialist that can look out for him. And there's folks who look out for him when he's not having a great day. At the same time, in my son's class, there are kids that are not reading yet, I don't think, where I should say they have difficulty. And they're also accommodated. I've been in there because I've written a play for the kids that we did together. Other parents are welcome in the classes, parents with special skills, whether it's grammar or history, and they feel welcome in 7 Generations to come in and work with administrators and the teachers. It's an unusual school. I mean, you guys know that. Working with regular schools, even the best ones, they're not very permeable a lot of the times. Parents can complain, but can they actually enter into a dialogue with administrators and teachers? That's hard to do. Teachers are sometimes defensive, rightfully so. Administrators can be, or they're cautious to speak, on the record. At this school, when you come in and talk to these folks, you have a discussion. They don't say yes to everything, but they think about it. And we're hopeful that as the school goes forward and becomes a secondary school, if it does, these guys will be East Penn students. for as long as they're in school, and that'll be to your credit, and they will, anything they achieve will also be on your record. They won't just leave, take your money and then go elsewhere and go to regular high schools. I think after being in 7th Gen, they wouldn't really want to. So that's kind of what I'd like to say. These kids depend on the school, kids of all levels, and it's to your credit that you support it. I know there are tough dollars and cents decisions. That's a given, in this environment. But an investment of this sort can pay off in many, many ways for you and for us as well down the road. So I guess that's about it. I just also want to say especially, I trust 7th Gen to handle my kid. And he's an unusual kid, and I trust them. I don't get on their backs about stuff. When they call me with good news or bad, I know they've thought about it first, and I know they've handled it well, and it just isn't just some bureaucratic nonsense. That's a great school to have in your district, an unusual school. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Mr. Robert Aptiker of also of Allentown.
Good evening. Live in Allentown, work at 7 Generations Charter School. I was with the family group as well. I'd like to read 2 documents into the record. The first of which is a letter from Patricia Vathis. Ms. Vathis is the Environment, Ecology, and Science Curriculum Advisor for the Division of Standards and Curriculum at the Pennsylvania Department of Education. She supervised the creation and implementation of the Pennsylvania State Standards for Environmental and Ecology Education. Ms. Vathis also worked directly with the teachers and staff of 7 Generations Charter School in our first year of operation. The second document is a certificate from the SEER organization, State Environmental Education Roundtable, the organization that pioneered and formulated the EIC curriculum model with input from 16 states' departments of education. The SEER organization staff has trained, guided, and evaluated us for 3 years as we implemented this unique curriculum. I actually did submit copies of these documents to the members of the board through Ms. Birdsall. Thank you. When we applied for our charter 3 years ago, Mr. Ballard asked if we were really going to use the curriculum we had presented in our application, the EIC curriculum referred to in the documents I'm about to read. And he said if we did not, he would call us to account. He expressed so much doubt that he moved to stipulate that our charter be limited to 3 years instead of the standard 5, so that we could be evaluated as to our adherence with the curriculum in our charter. At the time, the question and warning seemed to me pointed and disparaging, a challenge to our honesty and integrity. In retrospect, I'm glad he asked, because in our 3 short years of operation, years in which we have labored to build a school that served the needs of our students and complied with Pennsylvania state educational standards, the EIC curriculum model has been the true north to which we oriented our educational compass. These documents attest to our compliance with the charge and challenge issued to us by a member of your board 3 years ago. As you consider our application for rechartering, please keep this letter and certificate close at hand. The first letter is addressed to Dr. Seidenberger, and I'll try to read quickly.
Mr. Aptiker, you have about 1 minute left.
Okay. Well, I'll read as much of this letter as I can, and I'll tell you that the certificate from SEER indicates that we're the only school in Pennsylvania to have been certified as an EIC school. Not the only one in the nation, but the only one in Pennsylvania. This letter is long overdue in recognizing the accomplishments of 7 Generations Charter School, East Penn School District. I have been using 7 Generations as a shining example of the kind of educational program that addresses the environment and ecology mandated K-12 standards through an integrated model known nationally as EIC, with the emphasis on using the integration of all subject areas into the environment and ecology standards. There's an additional portion. I'll go to the last paragraph, and I'll thank you for your time, and I'll invite you to please read the letter in its entirety at a later time. As I travel around the Commonwealth and have other schools looking for exemplary models that do curriculum as well as hands-on outdoor experiences, I give 7 Generations as one of those diamond programs that should be emulated. I congratulate you for setting the bar so high. Sincerely, Patricia L. Dathis, Environment and Ecology Acting Science Curriculum Advisor. And as I said, you have copies of this, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Aptiker. And the last request I have is from a Mr. David Howard of Emmaus.
way up here. Good evening. My name is Dave Howard, and I live at 777 Pine Street, right over there on the corner. And my son, Vaughn, is 7 years old and is now a second grader at 7 Generations, where my wife and I were founding members. Vaughn was part of the first class of kindergartners enrolled there. I'd like to thank you for making the charter school a reality and encourage you to allow it to continue. Like me, Vaughn probably isn't going to break any records for the most focused student of all time. When I was a kid, there were times when I was a little hard to reach if I was sitting in a room all day. But there were types of learning that really excited me, namely reading and writing stories and being outside. I'm a big believer in public education because I went to public schools and had several teachers who were exceptional and who recognized that I learned a little bit differently. Partly because of them, I turned out to be a journalist, and I'm now a magazine editor over at Rodale. And most of my writing is focused on the outdoors. Vaughn is far enough into his schooling now that I see a lot of similarities. Ask him to do a math problem and he squirms a little bit. Ask him to look at a collection of bugs under a log in our backyard and he's electrified. He's fascinated by the way mulch sets off steam on a hot day. He's excited to learn about animals that live in ponds and the woods and about caves and birds and oceans. He already knows a lot more than I do about clouds. And there's no way to tell how many different ways that this might manifest as he grows to be my age. He may be an environmental lawyer, he may be a journalist like me. He may find any number of different ways to serve his community and his world. I believe that at 7 Generations, he's not just learning what's necessary to be successful in the world. He's plugging into his own story, the story of what he wants his life to be about, if he is able to write it himself. The way I see it, 7 Generations it's not better than any other East Penn schools. It's just suited for a different kind of learning. I ask you to allow students like Vaughn and me to continue to have the opportunity to learn in this way. Thank you.
Thank you. Having no more requests to address the board, we have approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion, please? Are there any comments or corrections to the minutes? None appearing. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We have a representative from Lehigh Career and Technical Institute, Ms. Hines.
Mr. Ballard. If I may introduce Mrs. Hines.
Go right ahead.
Mrs. Sandra Hines is the Executive Director of Lehigh Career and Technical Institute. She was hired to replace, or I should say to succeed, Dr. Clyde Hornberger, who has retired. Mrs. Hines was previously the Executive Director at the Upper Bucks, right? Upper Bucks Career and Technical School. Prior to her tenure there at Upper Bucks, she served for several years at LCTI. She has a background not only in career and technical education, but also as a career and technical practitioner. She was trained as a cosmetologist, owned her own beauty school, taught cosmetology before moving into administration. I think as the chair of the Joint Operating Committee at LCTI, I will say that we have been delighted to have Mrs. Hines serving with us again, and we're glad to have her expertise, her enthusiasm, and her experience with us at LCTI.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw, and thank you all for allowing me to come tonight. I'll only take just a few moments. I wanted to put a face with a name so that if you heard my name for any reason, you would know who I was. You know, they say you can't go home again, but I found quite happily that you can go back home, and I am so happy to be back at LCTI. It is just a wonderful school, and it's in great shape. It's a beautiful facility. We have wonderful administrators, caring and very knowledgeable teachers.
And so there is no reason for me to come in and with plans of making any big changes to that school. Dr. Hornberger has left such a legacy, and I'm really happy to pick up the reins from where he left off. I do have 3 goals, though, that I'm going to be focusing on during my tenure there. The first one being is to make sure that we're providing the best possible education for our students at the lowest possible price for our districts. We realize that we are on the backs of our 9 sending districts. So we're really going to be continually looking at our budgets, making sure that we're spending the money wisely without hurting our programs. Our programs are the heart and soul of our school. It's why we are there, is to give strong academic and technical training to the students who come to LCTI. Secondly, I want to make sure that we're providing the best possible opportunities, educational opportunities for our students. I really want to focus on making sure that our students get as many certificates, industry-recognized certificates, credentials that are available to them, because that's going to make them a lot more employable when they leave us. We also want to focus on dual enrollment. We have L-Tri-C right across the street. There's no reason that more of our students are not going over to L-Tri-C to start to take their college courses while they're still with us. And L-Tri-C and Bloomsburg University has entered into a new Bachelor of Science degree in technical leadership, and it's in cooperation with LCTI. So we want to get the word out about that. It starts in the fall. We want to get a lot more students involved in this bachelor's degree program, because it really will be the icing on the cake for our students. They are technically prepared for the business and industry, but with this new bachelor's degree, it's going to put a polish on those students who, once they get into the business and industry, they are really going to be ready for the leadership roles that will come their way in the future. And the third thing I want to do is make sure that we're continuing our strong connections with business and industry. That's twofold. First of all, if we have that strong business and industry connection, we're going to make sure that all of our programs are very strong, that they are relevant to business and industry needs, and we really are training the students for the skills they need to be successful. And then secondly, as we make those connections, we can, particularly in the area of customized job training, as we begin to take on the role as trainers for the business and industry, that extra funding coming into our school, we're hoping can take some of the burden off of our sending districts. As you know, we realize that it is tough economic times, and budgets are tough right now. So it's another way that we're hoping to help out in this tough times. I do want to thank our JOC members, Mrs. Fuller, Ms. Hyde, Mr. Rhodes, Mr. Earnshaw, for being our representatives and for their leadership role in our JOC, and to keep our school as strong as it is. I know you have a big agenda tonight, so again, thank you for all of your support, and thank you for allowing me to come tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Hyde. Appreciate you coming. Now we have another welcome set of speakers. We have our Emmaus High School Student Government Report with Kristen French and Shiv Joshua.
First, I just wanted to mention that Kristen had a varsity soccer game that began at 7 o'clock, so we have a substitute. I'm going to let Megan introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Megan Smolinski. I'm the president of SGA at Emmaus High School. Firstly, the senior ball will be held on Saturday, April 28th at the Palace Center from 7 to 11. The after ball will be held at the school from 11:30 p.m. to 5 a.m. after the senior ball. The junior prom will be held on Saturday, May 5th at the Roadway Inn from 6:30 to 7. I mean, to 6:30 to 10.
On May 1st, Representative Charlie Dent is coming to speak with the AP American government students on such topics such as his day-to-day schedule and what being a congressman entails. It's a great opportunity to learn more of the practical applications of what these AP government students are learning.
Emmaus placed first in the region in the PA Math League contest. Top scores from participants are added to the cumulative score to give the school their score for the year. Emmaus ranked 12th out of 141 schools in Pennsylvania.
For the fourth time in 6 years, the EHS robotics team has been invited to the World Championship in St. Louis. They are one of the 120 schools invited out of 1,500 schools competing worldwide.
Victoria Beck won a National Civil Medal in the 2012 Scholastic Art and Writing Awards for her drawing titled Inner Grace. Only the top 11% were given national gold or silver medals. Victoria and her art teacher, Tracy Maley, will attend a Scholastic Award ceremony at Carnegie Hall on Friday, June 1st.
Also on June 1st, the art department is hosting their annual art show in the high school from 6:30 to 9:30. And it's always a great pleasure to see all of the amazing pieces that they've been working on all year.
The spring choral concert will be held on May 10th at 7:30 in the auditorium. From out of nowhere, our men's a cappella group will perform on May 12th at 7:30 in the auditorium as well.
That's everything we have for tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments for our student government representatives? I do wish, Ms. Fuller.
Simply that I was privileged to attend Guys and Dolls twice. And it was phenomenal. So please take our good wishes back to the technical cast, the crew, the musicians. It made me very proud.
I'd like to second Ms. Fuller's comments. We attended on Saturday, my wife and I, and we have seen Broadway shows that were worse produced than that production, and I want to especially comment on the choreography. It was outstanding. So convey back that a number of board members attended, and we're very appreciative of the quality and the image that it projects of the East Penn School District and its students. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
And you're welcome to pack up and bring all the rest of this material, which might be a good study for an advanced placement government class.
Thank you.
We'll now go on to the report of the Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Thomas Seitenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. I'm going to start with, for our students, end it with having an opportunity to talk to Congressman Dent. I know in a couple board meetings we've talked about potential impact of the federal budget, and this is an extremely well-written article I'm distributing. It's written by Amy Baxter, who's works in the policy legislative division of Allegheny County IU. They're large enough to have one. When I was in Chester County, we had Jake Diley, and he served in a similar role. Our IU here is a little too small to have such a person on staff. But this is a really well-written article. And to give you an idea, if Congress and the President cannot agree on what's going to happen with the mandatory cuts for dealing with the deficit, and this article will give you a little bit of an impact of what may happen in public education throughout the country and specifically in Pennsylvania. So I'm not going to go through the article in its entirety, but some of you have asked, and this is the doom and gloom if it doesn't happen. I'm also going to pass out a series of items that can go in your budget books, but one which I'm not going to pass out now, you can put in your budget book. We just got a notice from Pennsylvania Department of Education today regarding their proposed transition from their current assessment plan to a new one in 2012-2013. And this is in direct relationship to the Common Core standards. Now, it's only proposed, but it goes back and restores the 3 Keystone exams. I know we've talked about that. It'll be Algebra 1, Literature, and Biology. And there's a whole, on the document you'll get, there is a whole schedule of events that are going to happen over the next 2 years. I know Mr. Bucker and some others have asked us about this. Here's your new schedule. And yes, it does mean significant work for us in the district. We're going to have to spend a lot of time aligning once more. It's going to be a never-ending job. But we see a lot of work internally in our district to make sure that our curriculum is aligned with what's going to take place as far as the state assessment program. So a lot of things, and again, I would remind everyone, it's simply proposed. I suspect that this will be some interesting dialogue, but nonetheless, that's what we received today, so you can have a copy of that. One of the things that, as a superintendent, you always get to attend that you really enjoy doing every year, and that is the Donnelly Awards for Excellence. This year was the first year we had a breakfast. Basically, one senior from each Lehigh Valley High School is honored, and the honor is given in the name of Mr. Ed Donnelly, who's been a friend of education, former CEO of Air Products, just a tremendous supporter of public education in the area. And our award winner this year was Karthik Nacharaj. Just want to read a little bit about Karthik. I had a chance to sit with his parents, and very nice parents. Father's an engineer for Air Products as well. Karthik, he's going to study mathematics in college. He has achieved a GPA of 4.4186 and ranks. And listen to this. This is what I love. He ranks in the 100th percentile of his class. Good. Get to see what 99 looks like. He's a National Merit Finalist and AP Scholar with distinction. He attained superior achievement in the Pennsylvania Math League, distinguished participation in the American Region Mathematics League, in first place in the 38th Annual John Steiner Gold Exam. Karthik is, according to his parents, maybe looking at the Honors College at Penn State, so we wish him well. And I'm sure he'll be an honors graduate at graduation. So I think some of you already met him this fall when we honored our national merit, at that time, semifinalist. Also, great pleasure. As you know, I sit on the Da Vinci board, and we will now have our fourth high school teacher, high school teacher on May 5th, inducted into the Da Vinci Hall of Fame. Steve Byer, he will be inducted as a Grand Master teacher. And again, if you know anything about Steve Byer, you know the excellent work that he does with our kids in the environment. I don't think there's anyone better in Lehigh Valley than what Steve does. And this past Saturday, he ran a cleanup at Mass Day and had a lot of kids out. And so I think it's just wonderful that Steve is going to get this prestigious award. I will certainly be there on May 5th for the reception. And by the way, if you really like science, Jeff Lieberman, who used to be on the Discovery Channel, he is going to be doing a special workshop that afternoon for students. And he'll also be the speaker at night at the May 5th awards dinner. Also, I'm pleased to tell you that we had 28 high school students who took part in a German competition at Penn State recently. And I'm very excited to tell you that our high school finished first. Over 300 students participating across the state. So I certainly want to thank Mrs. Warheftig and Mr. Bigsignani, and congratulations to them for the work they did with their students. In all the good news, we do have some disappointing news. We received, Mr. Glancy specifically, that our little bank downstairs, part of our curriculum, we received notice from First Banker that it's going to close on July 9th. So we are working with other banks to see if someone would be interested in opening a branch. I mean, that's a very valuable part of our high school program, and sorry to see it go. We certainly understand their business model, but we are shopping at every bank, and I think we have some that may be interested in doing business with us. Hopefully, it's a nice little bank branch. On Wednesday, 9:30, we're having our second annual real estate get-together. At this time, we're going to hold it at Willow Lane in our library. We're going to talk about that real estate, what we found out, as a lead into my budget update. Also, if you noticed in the agenda tonight, we gave you notification that we're going to have an excess sale of district equipment. If you're into the food service business and you like spoons, we have 806 spoons available for sale. And there's a couple of nice fixtures, ice cream makers. There's a buffalo chopper. If you're into buffalo chopping, that could be something of interest to you. And Mr. Glancy, I'm sure he'll be a great MC, and Mr. Ritter, hopefully people will submit. See, we're going to do this sometime this summer, right?
Yeah.
Hey, it goes in miscellaneous revenue. Who knows? We can make a lot of money, we can make nothing, but we're going to try to get rid of this stuff. So we're looking forward to an entertaining summer. Also want to let you know that through the hard work of Mr. Moan, we now, students, German students in Eyre and Lower Country Middle School are communicating with a girls' school, St. Dominicus. It's a Mädchen school, that means it's an all-girls school. And I got the name here. In Karlsruhe, Germany, that's southwest Germany, right along the French border. And so our kids are getting a chance to share information through Moodle. They're running blogs, discussion groups, and there is a recording device in Moodle that kids can hear our English and we can hear the German, and we're certainly excited about it. Also want to congratulate Mr. Moan. He was recently published in the SIG admin newsletter for ISTE. He put a nice piece in regarding our use of iPods to work with ELL students at the high school. Very nice article. Congratulations, Mr. Moan. And as challenged, I have some handouts. Unfortunately, we killed a lot of trees today, but it's good stuff. I remember the board saying if we could find some people to support our hard copy of our district calendar, to go ahead and do it. So through Mrs. Bloy's efforts, we've put out an advertisement. I'm happy to say that we're almost halfway through our goal. We need about $8,000 of contributions, and then we can give parents what they really want, which is a hard copy of the district calendar for their refrigerators. And so we're actively trying to find some vendors that would be interested. So I want to thank Mrs. Bloys for her work there. Now, along with that, we have a pretty strict policy about circulating flyers, and we always seem to get into a couple spats every year with some overzealous vendors who are out for profit. Especially this year we had a couple that just didn't accept no for an answer. So we were talking amongst ourselves then, and I know some districts like Parkville are really going overboard with advertisements, but we see a pilot this year coming up, and what we want to do is on our website, and talk to Mr. Moe and Mr. Stabinger. So what I envision on our dashboard is an area where parents and staff members can click on, and you would have a bucket of resources. And so if you are in the commercial business, there are some people that offer services to kids for a fee. Instead of running off 5,000 copies, we'll charge a one-time fee. Parents can click on and get that information. And I think we have a generalized proposal there. We're not asking for $5,000. I think it's a modest fee. But nonetheless, it solves our problem of putting things, unsightly things on tables in hallways and not having to fight that fight every year. Know your profit. We don't submit those. And even our policy is not to pass out information such as youth group registration. So we're going to have a bucket for youth group registrations, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Lower Country Youth Association, the Emmaus Youth Association, charitable events. We run a lot of charitable events. Click on. There are, if you're into Walk for Autism, there's something that's near and dear to your heart, you'll see that. And then we get a lot of requests to distribute information from colleges and universities, specifically about graduate programs. So again, we're going to try it with the board's permission for a year. Certainly could be viewed as a miscellaneous revenue. I don't know how much, probably not much, but at least it's a start. And then we thought perhaps moving along to local businesses, if they're interested in doing that, again, discount for people who have a business in the East Penn school district, and we'll see what happens the first year. So at least we're trying something different. And it will not be intrusive, it will not be obnoxious. It will not be blatant. You have to click on our dashboard, and you'll see an array of services all grouped according to their categories. So that's what we're thinking about.
Dr. Seifert?
Yes.
I think you'll need to bring this as an item before the board.
Yes.
With the policy to go with
We
it.
certainly will. I'm just telling you what we're thinking tonight. We're not, we haven't gone out actively for this website. We're just reviewing it with you tonight. And certainly, as part of the budget process, if you think it's a good idea, then I think we do have some minor changes to our board policy, and we'll take it
Well, I think
forward.
we'll need one specifically for advertising and selection of these things, and it'll have to be reviewed with the solicitor.
Of course, we will do that. Okay, I also want to compliment the Shoemaker Art Club. Once again, they've been invited to decorate the Rave Theater in the Promenade, and this time the theme was the Avengers, and they did a great job. They were down there for 4 hours this weekend. So if you're in a promenade, all you have to do is walk by the Rave, and I think our kids did a phenomenal job. Mr. Schweck does a great job, and they got some nice press in the morning call, and got some nice pictures from Mr. Schweck today. Okay, I want to remind everyone that on Wednesday night, 7 to 9, East Penn will be the place for an education forum. We have a flyer. I think it's been well advertised. What's at stake? There'll be a group of superintendents serving on the panel. We're looking forward to a discussion along with Susan Grobeski she's the Executive Director of Education Voters of Pennsylvania, Russ Mayo, Superintendent of Allentown, Rich Nizak from Parkland, Bob Gross from Salisbury, and Linda Diablo, recently retired. Secondary Curriculum Coordinator and myself will be volunteering to serve on the panel. And again, this whole forum is very much what's going on in the state of Pennsylvania as more and more parents become familiar with issues affecting school finance and what's going on. This is a valid attempt to educate parents, community members, so everyone's invited to attend. They'll be here 7 through 9 on Friday night. And I also, too, want to compliment the cast and the people behind the scenes for Guys and Dolls. It's just, as a superintendent of schools, sitting in the audience, and it doesn't get better. It really doesn't get better than that. And there are so many people behind the scenes: Rita Cortez, Jill Keebler, Diane Didona, Brent Oll, Bruce Denmead, Reinhard Harrington, and all those, so many parents that volunteer. And what can you say about the kids? I agree with you, Mr. Ballander. The choreography was every bit as good as you'll see on Broadway. And the singing and just the whole performance was so uplifting. And I took my mother-in-law along, and they just rave about it every year. And it was just great. It was just a great night out. So I too want to thank Jill and all those people, Jill Keever and all those people who were involved with Guys and Dolls. It was wonderful. Now, we have things we want to hand out. We have these.
Well, before you go on to the budget, which is, I presume, what you're going into,
Yes.
let's have, if there's any questions on the first part of Dr. Seidenberger's report, Mr. Earnshaw.
Yeah, what, is the bank branch going to remain open through the end of the school year?
July 9th.
Okay, so
July.
we'll be able to finish
Yes.
the current
Yes,
academic program.
July 9th.
That's great. And let me just throw in my 2 cents on Guys and Dolls. It was fabulous. I've been to a lot of our student performances. They're all top-notch, but this one was entertaining and light and happy, unlike maybe a couple of the other ones we've had in recent years, which were excellently presented, no question, but not quite as light and happy. So, thank you.
Any other questions for Dr. Seidenberger on this district update? No, you can proceed. to the
Oh,
budget.
thank you, Mr. We've taken the opportunity to punch some holes in this. We thought this could go right in the back of your budget book so you keep everything in one location. So I'll wait until we get those out to you. And I'll just go over the contents. and then I'm going to take these separately, okay? Just to make sure everybody has these. They're sets. I have a written report which I'm going to go over tonight. Also, there's a letter from the Pennsylvania School Funding Campaign, which we'll talk about, which gives you a focus for comments when you're talking to legislators. Also, the PDE new testing rates. You don't have to put that in your book, but I thought you might want to have that at some point. We've given you a copy of the results of kindergarten registration, as I've talked about that long and hard. And then I will be referring later on to the meeting, a report that Bob Culp, Assistant Executive Director in the IU, and I put together regarding cyber charter school cost and options. And then we have a report from Mr. Glancy on PlanCon J payments, which will be part of my report. We've also given you some additional information about cyber charter school students and where exactly they are in grade levels throughout the district. So you might want to see that, and by school, okay, grade levels. And then I have a memo from Mrs. Picaric, who was kind enough to put something together regarding contingency funds. And then we have two other forms that Mrs. Sertibal was kind enough to do, and I think you have seen both, well, you've seen one of them. This one is how to calculate the mills and what's the exceptions. And this one, I think Mrs. Donchis, you asked us for unfunded mandates and what's some of the impact of those things. So, not necessarily going to go through all these line by line, but we're trying to give you some information this year. Let me start by saying kindergarten registration. Very successful this year. We certainly got the word out, and we had significant participation. And I think when I put my report, we were about 80 students more, maybe a couple odds and ends, but right now about 80 students more registered for kindergarten at this time than it was last year. Now, to be honest with you, I don't know if we've done a better job of getting parents out, or will we see the usual increase in kindergarten kids that we have each August? We do. There are just some parents that we can knock on the door and give them registration materials and they won't fill them out. So we're always going to have that rush of people. But I think these numbers tell a story. And I think we have to start paying attention to this story. We'll know more, and I think this is going to be a critical summer because I'm going to see, I think we're all anxious to see if what I'm about to tell you is going to manifest itself in other grade levels. We have been, the meeting on Wednesday with real estate agents is really a chance to get together face to face. But through Mrs. Bloys and through my contacts, we've had significant conversations with lots of local realtors in the last 3 weeks. And I can tell you this, our work was done before the morning call. An article came out last week about the Lehigh Valley real estate market heating up. Things are heating up in East Penn, in just about every portion of this district. What we're seeing, what we're hearing from real estate agents, that if a house is priced appropriately and has had some alterations, some fixing up, that it's going to go, specifically in Lower McCountry Township, it's going to go very quickly. And so what we heard, at least from Pat White, is that sales are brisk and homes are moving. Now, we're also starting to hear from our real estate agents that people that are empty nesters, like my wife and I, our kids are older, moved out, that people are starting to downsize and sell beautiful homes like in Ancient Oaks, and younger families are starting to grab those homes. So my concern as a superintendent is, again, maybe we won't know the impact in year one until October, when we see our true October numbers. But if you recall, we had a rush of first grade kids last year in August that really impacted class size at Willow Lane and Shoemaker. So I don't know what's going to happen, but with the information we're hearing from realtors, number of kids coming in without a whole lot of new housing starts, I'm starting to wonder, and I think I sent you my report, is our 5-year period of enrollment stability coming to a close? We've always felt that when the market conditions turn around, that this is a highly desirable school district. Unfortunately, there's a lot of area that can be developed. And I can tell you this, I've spoken to each borough and municipal manager. And here's the good news. We have agreed. When I was the superintendent at Avon Grove, Chester County, when Avon Grove had rapid growth, we decided that we would meet together quarterly and talk about impending requests for licenses, engineering studies, water studies. All those kind of things are key indicators. And so I'm happy to tell you that every borough manager has agreed, and we think it's a great idea. So we'll be meeting the first time this summer, and then setting up the structure. We'll move around and have meetings in different borough offices, and I think we all agree that we need to touch base with one another. But I can tell you that only at this point in the borough of Emmaus is there no significant plans for any great growth. Albertus has the potential. We've talked about the Hills of Lockridge. Mr. Jandal's already been approved for development there, and that can start anytime Mr. Jandal wants to. At least 80 units of townhomes, and we all know they go fast. And when we did redistricting several years ago, we talked about that. And that is why Albertus has a little bit of room to house students. Upper Milford, there's a condo development that is, and by the way, Mr. Clancy and I took a ride around the district. I took one by myself, and then I drove him along the next day, and we actually counted new residences and condos that are going up. They're going up in interesting areas. Like Brandywine Village had 6 homes to complete that development. They went on sale and were sold in less than a month. And they're all under construction. So things are heating up. So, of course, our interest lies with Lower McCoungie Township, what's going on there, but also the borough of McCoungie. I'm talking to Chris Bean. There's been some large pieces of property that have been purchased years ago, and our understanding is people are just waiting, developers, until time comes, and there's also at least a 30 single home development that's on the books and planning stage in the country. And so I wonder out loud, is the peace and quiet, are we turning? Are we going to have to look at moving into an observant mode as we move forward? So we will continue to monitor the real estate situation. It certainly allows us to be a little more optimistic on some revenues, but we'll see. Okay, looking at my written report, I'm just going to take you through this, maybe not necessarily word by word, but I think it's worth the time spent to go over this. And this is intended to give you an update of where we are in the process right now, and also some big picture and also some details. Just so that you know, we do work on internal goals, my staff and I, and we do have, believe it or not, budget process goals. And that is to maintain existing programs in East Penn School District as much as humanly possible. And at this point, unlike other places in Lehigh Valley, we haven't had any acrimony, and I really think that we can accomplish that in this year's budget. I really do. I won't say it unless I meant it. I think, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple moments, an emerging issue, certainly hot topic of Wednesday night is to appropriate funds to cover expenses for all unfunded and underfunded mandated programs, which is becoming more and more of a burden, and we're going to take you through that tonight. And to recommend a budget that is fiscally prudent and educationally sound, which is always our objective. Again, I always like to make sure that board members understand big numbers. And so, just to remind you that we did, Mrs. Sertable, when we gave you documents before, the mill was a little bit less. And now when we looked at, when we got our figures from Lehigh County, a mill is now worth $1,628,000 and $1,628,499, which is a slight uptick. So what's the index worth based on that new number? Index of 1.7, that's worth $1.2 million and some change. And then the PDE approved exceptions are in the neighborhood of $933,000 or 1.2. So that's the last two figures, the index and the exceptions, are the parameters of the budget. And I can tell you that we will be below that figure. I can definitely promise you that we will be below that figure. And I think in a significant way when we give you the next budget that we produce for your vote in May.
Could you define that figure since there are two of you there?
Pardon me? I'm sorry. The index is what we're trying to convey there is the allowable parameters of the budget that we can increase are, the index is worth $1,298,473, and the approved PDE exceptions are worth $933,698. So that's the elastic in the budget.
2.92%.
Yes. And that's what you have in your budget books. And remind everyone that that is indeed a draft. And with that in mind, unlike other years, we did put a copy of that draft of our budget book online, and people can see that. With the provision, though, that we're not going to make changes in that document. That would just be a little too much for us to handle. People are interested, you can follow along what's going on at this meeting, the meeting in May, and certainly in June. But we will make the changes in the final budget and put them up there like we do every year. But that document is now online for people to view, that budget book. Okay, and again, classify the next area as respectful reminder of actions taken for the 2011 budget that were not available for the 2012-2013 budget. And I think it's always good to take a step backward and look at what we were able to do last year that we simply cannot do this year. And there's a variety of reasons, but I think most of you are certainly aware of those. Employee wage freezes. Every one of our employee groups took a wage freeze last year. We have contracts in place. That is not the case for this year.
There are partial freezes.
Partial freezes, yes. And we'll go over that they're in your budget book. But I can tell you that all those agreements are under the cost of living. In most cases, under 2%. Last year, we had about 23 people in the professional ranks that retired. We took a look at the landscape, and for 12 of those folks, we did not replace them. And I think you saw the net result of that. Certainly, when I gave you a class size report, and by the way, if you've lost that, let me know, and I'll gladly give you a copy of the class size report we gave earlier this year. Let me know. I can get one to you. But you'll see the impact of that. When people talk about having small class sizes, that's not really a norm in East Penn. But that's not really been a norm in East Penn since I've been here. We have a little bit higher class size than most districts in Lehigh Valley. Last year we took out summer music and fitness programs. As I noted last year, Mr. Ritter and Mr. Glansing did a great job negotiating a lot of operational contracts with our vendors. They squeezed them. We just can't squeeze that anymore. This year we got the savings and realized them last year. Last year we found a significant amount of money, over $100,000, on some budget overlapping We have not had that in our preliminary budgets this year, so we're not going to have the savings that we were able to pull out. I think it was about $114,000 last year. Well, last year we had a large decrease in cell phone usage and large decrease in cell phone users. We've trimmed that back by about $50,000 last year. We are certainly going to take a look at that, and I'll talk about that in a couple of moments, but I don't anticipate the big savings we had last year. Also, with our commitment to going green, we saw a huge decrease in printing costs. One of the things we cut out was the district calendar. That saved us, I think it was about $17,000 last year. So with all ends and adult ed, it was about $17,000 that we cut out. So, and also last year we had, if you remember, a year and a half ago, we had a rather large refinancing, about $400,000 hit that we don't have this year. This year we had successful refinancing, but we're spreading that over a couple of years. Last year was also an LCTI refund. There were some fund balances that had to be readjusted, so we took that last year. And then we did some other things like making driver's ed, summer school, revenue, and expenditure neutral. In other words, the students that want to participate, they pay for those services instead of us paying the teachers. In essence, the students pay the teachers, and that worked out. I think driver's ed was worth $50,000 alone last year. And then we also were able to reap the benefits of all the districts in our consortium going in and doing a health care bid, not this year, last year, and that dropped our health rates down. And this year we have very little, if any, increase. The only adjustments we have are for some additional people in the organization. And last year we cut field trips. And then things that I think are still going to be beneficial, Mr. Ballard, and we'll certainly highlight those for you when we do our budget presentation. We negotiated, the board renegotiated labor contracts, and those are going to still pay us dividends this year. And if you notice, most of the school districts are doing what we did last year. A wage freeze this year and minimal increases next year. We were there last year. One of only 44 school districts. The governor asked, we responded, and I think we did the responsible thing last year. Now, yes?
Mr. Ballard? Yeah. If I could just add, not only did we respond to the governor's call, but our employees.
Yes.
It was really gratifying that they were willing to give up so much for us, and we do appreciate those sacrifices.
Okay. One of the things that you got the budget books, we didn't say too much about them, but there was a lot of work behind the scenes, and so what we did in the next 2 pages, and again, I don't think I have to go through all these. Some of you like to read this stuff. I think you all should read it. What the next page, what it represents, I think just over the next page after that, were all the changes we made from the preliminary budget you approved up until what's in that budget book. And so, when you look at medical insurance, flat rate calculator, we were able to reduce that account by $394,000. And all of those with the minuses are areas that we cut or reduced. Yes?
Ms. Tompkins?
And they're included already in the
They are already, those are already in the budget book. Those,
March 26th.
yes, remember, everybody would say the first budget was kind of, what's the word, formality. Then we get down to business. And so from that first preliminary budget, that little skeleton document, to what started to grow the budget in the budget book, these are all the changes that we've made, okay, and their corresponding accounts, okay? So if you see a minus, it's a cut. If you don't see a minus, it's an addition. Like IU transportation, that's an increase of 142. That's directly responsible to the governor's grant. That's the money that we used to have just flow through money. Now we have to book it, and it's expenditure, but unfortunately, when we book it, it shows an increase of 142,000, although last year had no impact on the budget at all. That's the kind of stuff that annoys us. But you need to see that, okay? And then we also were able to do some other work this year in revenues, which I'm really happy about, that we haven't been able to do in other years, okay? Now, the work is ongoing. I think we gave you the budget books March 26th. And although the amounts look minuscule, there's another side of the story, and I'm going to continue. So what have we done after we received the books? Well, I've made some various department cuts and some small, tiny salaries, and they're just a harbinger of things to come. We also realized that Cambridge is now going to be renting Lower McCountry Middle School, so we had a book that has a revenue, and then also in working with Mr. Ritter and Mr. Glancing and their staff, realized that we're probably going to have an increase in utilities in that building, so we wanted to book that so that people would get an accurate portrayal of what's going on. So in other words, we anticipate revenues from Cambridge of $37,000, and that is somewhat, then that is negated a little bit by $12,000 of additional cost to heat and light Lower McCountry Elementary School. This year it's in mothballs. Next year it'll be under full swing. Also, through Mr. Clancy's efforts, we're anticipating another savings of $61,000 in energy efficiency revenue, so we're very excited about that.
Mr. Buffer? Just a question. There's a line that says various department cuts,
Yep.
and it's a positive number. Should that be a negative number? Is that actually a reduction?
Those are just numbers that we're reducing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Those should be negative numbers.
They would be, but I'm just telling you where we are, okay? This is, they should be negative numbers if you really want to know. I'm not adding, they're cutting. And, yeah, except for the revenues are, but those are just, yeah, those are cuts. Those are definite cuts. Okay, so, and again, we're going to see some increases in some of the real estate revenues. Again, Mr. Glancy and I, we got in the car, we drove around, we counted. And we looked at existing sales to get an idea of how much a home may bring. We did some estimates, so we're a little more precise this year. I think there's about 42 homes that are under construction in the district. I think we saw just about every one. And so we're trying to accommodate those. And of course, some of it would be a full year of revenue, others would be interim, so we split it in half, depending on what we saw, what we eyeball of those construction projects and where they were in stages. Okay, another thing that we always seem to talk about here is use of fund balance. And I want to let everybody understand right off the bat that in your budget books, we are using $4 million to help balance this budget from our fund balance. And I thought it was important that you might want to take a look at the history of what we've done the last 10 years. And so, as you can see, last year we budgeted $3,083,000, and so forth and so on. One of the years, 2008, 2009, we had a totally balanced budget. You remember, those were the good old days. Since that time, but I found it also interesting. I was certainly not here in 2003, 2004, but I was assured that this was one of your periods of growth. See why I get scared? We talked about kindergarten kids and kids moving in. This was a big year for you in terms of student growth. So that means you had to hire some people and deal with some kids you weren't expecting. So that's a number that you want to pay attention to. At least the district had it to apply. Okay, and then like we do every year, we'll do more of this in the May meeting, give you an idea what are the major increases in next year's budget. As you know, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, Social Security retirement, over $2 million, no one's surprised by that. Instructional salaries, in the accounts, a little bit over $1 million. Charter school tuition increase, and that's for both bricks and mortar and cyber. That's what we're anticipating. $633,000 next year in charter school tuition. Additional. Support salaries, those are for mostly aides, administrative assistants. Student transportation, it's going up about $327,000. Budgetary reserve, we now have reached our 5% target. I'll talk about that in the section that I reserved to call good news. Other schools, we have some students that are registered outside the district, $234,000. Health insurance, again, this is the balancing act. I think if you saw before, we had a big cut, $394,000. This is the balancing act. And then exactly what Mrs. Himes said, we're showing an increase in LCTI, $197,000 next year. And one of the things, Sandy left, but one of the things I'm certainly going to bring up as superintendent, and we want to talk long and hard about, LCTI currently budgets on a 5-year average of students. When I look at 5-year averages, that's not being kind to us. So one of the things, Sandy has come around, she's met with every superintendent. One of the things I mentioned to her, we might want to take a look at a 3-year data, and that might be kinder to us. Certainly not what's going on, not every kid that wants to go there can certainly go there, but in terms of the budget, it's a big difference between 300 students and 224, about 7,000 a kid. So it's something we might want to look at. I've talked to a couple other superintendents, and we'll work through the system with Sandy. My understanding is there's also going to be a new business manager, so that might be the time that we want to have those conversations. I understand the 5-year averages, I really do, but perhaps it's time that we talk about 3-year averages, which are kind to us. Maybe not some other districts, but I only care about us. Okay, and so those of you know, want to know what we're doing every day and who we're driving nuts in the district, and some of the people are looking surprised, but they should not be surprised because even though we hit people once, we come back again a second time. So we're going to be looking at athletics. What we're doing is looking at 2- and 3-year data, see what we budgeted, what we spent the last 2 or 3 years, to see if there's any patterns. And then if we see some patterns, we'll sit down and talk to people about what we see. So the usual suspects: athletics, curriculum improvement services, principal budgets, transportation, Willow Lane, business office software, automated call system. We have alert now. We have an opportunity maybe to look at a new vendor and save about $10,000 to $12,000 with new features. We're already looking at that now. Phone costs. We'll continue to look at not only cell phone usage, but is there an opportunity? We're now auditing all of our landlines to see if there's any lines that we're paying for that are not in use. And also, we do have a graduated program, and what I've challenged Mr. Glancy and Mr. Ritter is there an opportunity to move to fewer minutes that we pay for. In my superintendent's report, I'll let you know that I can tell you today we only have really one firing. At this point, I expect some others, but certainly not the numbers we had last year. So we haven't had an opportunity to do if there's any differentials in what I call breakage, difference between an exiting staff member and what we would anticipate the salary of replacement being. I don't know. Last year we had 23 of those, and 16, and we chose not to replace 12. This year I think we're really lucky if we hit 6 or 7, but still there'll be an opportunity for some savings. Also, we will certainly look at employee attrition. If people leave, the obvious question will be, do we have to replace those people in the organization? And so we'll look at non-certificated people mostly in that line item. Very little in technology. Miscellaneous revenues, certainly the sale I was talking about before, and the kind of things we may do with our calendar and the kind of things we may do with these websites. At some point we'll sit down and make an educated guess, and certainly it's not going to be a big number. And then something we talked about internally, foresight testing, that's part of high school, middle school, and probably about $8,000-9,000 there. Do we want to do that? Do we want to continue that? So that's a discussion we're having with our high school staff, and that could be impacted. And then certainly community program budgets as well. Okay, now.
Other questions? Mr. Bacher?
On the phone costs,
Yes.
you talked a little, I think the usage, graduated usage was a cell phone.
No, I'm talking about a generalized watts line.
Okay.
There may be an opportunity to look at our total minutes, and can we negotiate with our service provider to a less minutes?
Okay. And have we also looked at other suppliers for that as well?
We have, right now we have the supplier. We have been offered other opportunities. The other opportunities are break even. So it gives us no benefit, and it would cost hundreds of hours of staff time to make the changeover.
But I can tell you this, 2 years, we really work with Verizon on our cell phone, and we've really mitigated those expenses.
They have reduced their prices.
Yes. But, you know, one of the things, I think, not bragging, but we really, the big vendors, we've really tussled with those folks.
I was also interested in a landline vendor. I know there's possible to have someone else provide the service even though you don't change the physical phone lines.
Yep. So we're looking at all that. And I remember I said several meetings ago, we're looking at places we haven't looked at before. And that's what we're doing. Okay, now, that being said, we're doing our due diligence, and we expect to present a budget in May that will reflect these changes and our thinking. And I can honestly say that I think we're in a better spot than we were in last year. How better, I don't know yet. But if we want to work as a team, what I'm about to talk about, and there's a write-up from the Pennsylvania Campaign Funding Group, I think this is where we need to focus when we have those conversations with the members of the legislature. And I think these conversations are happening, not only in Lehigh County, but throughout the state. And this is where we need to zoom in, like lasers, and be extremely focused on the following items. Our charter school costs have now exceeded $3 million this year. We're anticipating 3.6 next year. I'm going to say this very carefully. This is not a reflection of how we feel about any charter school, cyber charter school. Not that at all. So I would be disappointed if someone left this meeting and said we are not supportive of charter schools. That is not the case. This is strictly a mathematics statement of where we are. And one of the things that I think most boards, most superintendents are still frosted about is when the governor and the legislature took away last year the reimbursements for all charter school students. That is a big item. And for those of you who don't know, I want to remind you that the reimbursements are based on a year in arrears. In other words, we would get reimbursed this year for last year's, we would get a reimbursement for last year's cost. So, to be honest, last year's costs were $3 million. And the last time we got reimbursed with the state, it wasn't 30%. I wouldn't expect them to do an increase. But however, going back to the 23% would be fair. And that, by board members, fellow board members, represents $700,000, which is 0.43 of a mil. It's a lot of money. That is a lot of money. And I think we should be pressuring the legislature. It's in the law. None of us in this room wrote that law. We want to support that law. But this, quite frankly, is what scares us as superintendents when you have an agenda of legislators to talk about vouchers, expanded charter schools. It's all well and good until the legislature and the governor walk away from their commitments. This is something that we all need the lobby to have restored. Again, it's not an charter school statement is just a mathematic statement. Also,
What is our well, currently we're paying what's about 8,800 per
just 8,800 and high 8,800, I think 17,600.
All right. So one of the arguments that we sometimes hear around charter schools is, well, the dollars follow the students. So just for my own curiosity, I multiplied 8,800 by 25. So I'm assuming we had an entire class of students. So let's say at McCungie Elementary School, 25 third graders got up and said, we're going to a charter school. They all left, they went to one or more charter schools. $220,000 in funding. That's at 8,800. So it's a little more than $220,000 goes with those 25 students. Well, we'd be able to reduce our expenditures by one teacher, and I think we've been planning about $70,000 for the cost of a teacher with salary benefits. So I subtract out $70,000, and I don't know, what is the current budget for an elementary student when we give those monies to the elementary schools?
In charter?
No, we give us.
Mr. Sternball,
I don't know how much that is.
Mr. Earnshaw wants to know per pupil cost when we give our budgets out to our principals. Our budget.
It's in the budget book, kind of per pupil allocation. Page 3-35. Elementary, we give $136.07 per student.
$136 per student.
Right.
All right. So we multiply that by 25, it's about $3,400. So right now we've managed to trim our costs by $73,400. So about, let's round it up to an even $75,000. And $220,000 of funding is left. Now, there are transportation costs. Those don't go away. They actually probably go up because it's probably more expensive to transport those students than to their neighborhood school.
We have separate roads.
Yes, separate routes. So, but let's just assume that's the same. So really what happens when we have charter school students leave the district, I'm looking at the numbers and saying it's almost $3 leave for every dollar reduction in cost, almost. But maybe $2.50, $2.75, whatever. So that ratio doesn't work out. So when people say that charter schools are such a great benefit to the school districts because we can eliminate all these costs, the numbers simply don't add up.
They certainly don't. And I'll move on to my issue number 2, and that is, I'm sorry.
I'd just like to tap onto that. I want to point out that they say the money follows the child, but it's not the state money that follows the child, because 82% of that cost is borne by the local taxpayers, because our current remuneration from the state is under 20% in this district of our total budget. So roughly 80 to 82% of those costs are coming from the local taxpayers moving to another school over which the taxpayers don't have as much control as they have of the local public schools. All right?
Now moving on, let's look at specifically cyber charter schools. And I don't think I'm saying anything that hasn't been said before. The Pennsylvania School Boards Association did a white paper a couple of years ago, state auditor report, and then I'm very happy about our little IU report which we put together. I really believe this should be a statewide report myself. I really do. And I don't.
It's been passed on to you.
Oh, I know. And I think people ought to do this because, one of the things that, again, respecting the words of the governor, he asked us to be, he wanted to create a more competitive environment. And I think we've done that in public education in Pennsylvania. I think it's a rare district right now in Pennsylvania that is not examining either starting their own cyber high school or joining a consortium or coalition. And as I reported a couple of board meetings ago, RIU is starting one. Northampton County, IU, Northampton County is starting theirs. We've seen one in Bucks County now. We've seen one in Montgomery County. And what's amazing to me is that we can do it for half the price of what the other vendors are doing. So at some point, I think legislators have to sit up and say, what's going on here? We're offering a great program. And I can tell you this, folks. I went in and I looked at our test scores at our own cyber high school. Our kids are doing pretty darn good in our own cyber high school. They really are. Maybe one or two kids are struggling, but by and by, I can tell you that our test scores are easily outdistancing the other cyber charter schools. So let's look at these numbers. I put together and worked with Bob Culp, and we looked at all the numbers, but it's staggering when you look at it, the options. And again, you can read this report on your own. But we looked at, the thinking goes, in RIU, Panther Valley has the lowest tuition rate. I think it's like $6,800. Whitehall, surprisingly, has the lowest special ed rate. So when we look at, if a cyber charter school is taking that money from Panther Valley and taking it from Whitehall, I don't think they're giving East Penn kids about 15% more of an education. Does anybody in this room believe that? No. If they're taking Panther Valley, why wouldn't they take our fee? So, and that's really the basis of the Pennsylvania School Boards Association white paper. So if we did RIU and took the lowest rate, that would be a savings of $236,000 for us and East Penn alone.
Could you explain that a little bit further?
Sure.
for the public, because they may not understand that
if anybody wants this, we'll gladly give this report.
The same student, if they were in two different districts, pays two different rates for the cyber.
Every school district in Pennsylvania has a tuition rate that is different. Parkland's rate is different than East Penn, and in our report we list what those exact numbers are. So, for instance, Allentown, their regular ed per pupil cost is $8,610. If you're in Salisbury, it's $11,000. So, if you're, let's say, Agora, and you're taking a kid from Allentown, you're taking it at $8,610. And I don't believe that the Salisbury kid is getting almost a $3,000 better education from the same entity. And then we have, in the same sheet, which is page 1 of our report, what the per pupil costs are for special ed. And again, Whitehall is the lowest in our IU, but if you're in Whitehall, you're paying $16,497 for a special ed student. And again, look at poor Salisbury, they're paying $25,000. Does anyone believe that those special ed kids are getting more services in an Agora? I sincerely doubt it. Could be wrong, but I doubt it. And it goes on. So the next thing we looked at, what are our real costs in our consortium? Parkland, East Penn, Whitehall, Southern Lehigh. Well, our fee, this is not something new, what we pay BLN a year, $4,200. So if the state would say, if you're offering a cyber high school, it's a choice, we're going to cap your cost at $4,200 a kid. Look at that savings, $729,000. Talking about big money. If you combine that with the reimbursement that we're not getting, that's $1.4 million, folks. Now we can talk about a really, really good budget this year. And then what I love to do is I like to cause trouble, as most people know me. State put out vouchers, and we have a voucher value in East Penn, so does every other district. And so what happens when we give parents a voucher to go to a cyber school? Look at those numbers. We would save $926,000, so I'm all ready to tell Pat Brown and Senator Mensch and Justin Simmons, hey, I'll support that voucher for cyber schools. We'll save a lot of money. Give the parents, in our case, it's like $2,400. We'll save $926,000. Now, the last thing I did, and I haven't done it in the report yet, simply haven't had time, but I plan to work with Bob Culp and put in another option, and that is what we're seeing from the Auditor General. He's recommending at least maybe a $3,000 differential between what our tuition rates are and what we should be paying for a cyber charter student. Now, those savings would be about $375,000, which is a little bit less, but still, when you add that to the charter school reimbursements, that's $1 million. And so, one of the things that we ought to be really focusing our energies on is doing something with charter school funding. And I think we have an agenda item tonight. And if anyone else needs any more numbers or analysis, I'll be glad to sit with you individually and go over this. Again, I want to say it's not that we're anti this stuff. It's about time that the legislature looks at the funding mechanisms specifically for cyber charter schools, and certainly I think it would be welcome to look at all cyber schools. All charter schools as well. The next thing, I think, significant issue that we ought to look at is special education. You know, when I look at, and I've already presented information to you, our special education population has increased by 12% in the last 5 years. During that 5-year time, we have not had an increase in state aid for special education. The CPI, Consumer Price Index, has increased by just about 10% in the last 5 years. So, what's in the governor's budget is for state aid and special education category to be a little over $3 million. If, and this is what's been bandied about, and I think we're going to talk about in the forum, if we can get a CPI increase for special ed funding this year, it would mean about another $81,000. Not a lot, but certainly something that's long, long overdue. So, when you're out and about, my recommendation is that you focus on 3 items in your conversations. Charter school reimbursements, it's part of law. I'll go conservative and say cyber charter school, at least the Auditor General, at least what he's recommending, and then an increase in special education. And that, if we've got that in additional state aid, that will be over $1 million, which is 0.71 of a mil. And where we are in the budget right now, if you took that money, none of you around this table would be extremely disappointed with the budget we would present. It's time. Now, something else. For those of you who like to have longer conversations with the legislatures, here's something else that you might want to talk about. That's the accountability grant. Now, the accountability grant that's not in the governor's block grant is the ABG grant. That's worth $214,817. It's a significant amount of money, but if you were to ask me, would I rather have the reimbursements for charter school rather than this, the answer is yes. Because this is restricted money. And we may or may not be able to use that money for its intended purposes. Because every year, the ABG grant changes a little bit. And sometimes we have to do a lot of thinking how we're going to use that money. It's not free money. We've got to account for it in certain ways. And so this will be nice to have, but it won't be my first priority. And then again, something near and dear to my heart, and I have a memo from Mrs. Pekarik in our handouts tonight, looking at special education contingency funds. For certain individuals, they are well-deserving certain children, we need to spend significant amounts of money for their appropriate education. This year, or last year, we submitted an application for $823,000. The state generally takes 1% of their special ed money and applies that to a pool. And again, we could do well this year, next year could be a lower amount, depending on the pool. My humble opinion is that the state really needs to look at that pool and increase that pool. And again, we haven't seen an increase, at least in 5 years. And so we're being capped. I think last year we got about 149,000. This year we're capped at 150,000. So even though our expenses are going up, we're still capped. And that is something that I think when we sit down and talk to individual legislators, at least they're listening, that they really need to do something with special education. So, any comments before I get into good news? We have good news tonight.
Any comments or questions for Dr. Seidenberger? Ms. Sanchez?
I have one question on the charter when it goes to our cyber charter school.
Yes.
And the medium or whatever, they need $800, but it costs us $4,200.
Yes, for our own students.
We get to, the district keep the balance of the Penn.
No, we don't, it's just it's an appropriation in our budget. Those students cost an additional $4,200. Okay? They leave here, and we have a contract with DLN, it's $4,200. But it's half what we're paying.
If they went to another
Yes.
cyber charter,
It would be $8,800. It's an additional expense. But we're saying we're in the choice game now. And our kids are doing well. They get an East Penn diploma. They go to prom. They can participate. They get a student identity, a badge. There's a lot, and we're happy with our program. Our goal is for us to take over that program wholly some year. Okay. Any questions on any of that?
Anything else? Mr. Ershaw?
Well, and just to point out, the cyber learning option that we make available is not a charter school. It is part of the East Penn offering, and we've managed to lure back a number of students who were attending cyber charter schools to our option. So although, yes, we are spending money, we're spending a lot less money to send them there than we would if they were going to a cyber charter.
And I don't want to make it sound like we're saving. By the way, I do believe that there are some kids that can handle a cyber school and some kids that can't. And I think our entrance into that market is a recognition that not all students can handle a full high school day. Our goal is to have a hybrid program where some kids may feel comfortable coming part of the day. That would always be our goal, but we understand there are some students that maybe they're a member of the Parkettes, maybe they're into acting, maybe into music, but those kids have a tendency to be highly motivated. And what I like about our program is that we interview all the families and they understand what the challenges are going to be. And there are challenges with going to a cyber school. Okay, any questions?
I have a
Mr. Bacher?
Just for clarification, you touched briefly on special education, and I'm just curious, I don't know much about it, for a cyber charter special education. I know in the district, sometimes there are sort of class size limitations, there are services that we can't offer that cause the special needs education to cost more. Is there any discussion about, I mean, some of these services that cause us to raise our costs, can they even be delivered over an internet connection? Is there any discussion about that?
That's one of the things we've been screaming about, and that's why the state's got to look at cyber charter school whole operations, especially those that are operated, or at least have management company contracts. You read the New York Times article about K-12 Inc. I think there's some interesting practices out there. You know, you have parents, they have an IEP, they create that IEP with those schools. If they have a signed IEP, then I can only assume that there's an agreement and that there's a contract. Much like we have with our parents, we have an IEP. That's what's going to constitute a child's educational program. and they have the same IEP requirements for cyber, so I'm assuming that a parent signs off for that.
Mr. Renshaw?
Thank you. Thinking about the K-12 Incorporated, it's really interesting. It's a publicly traded company that provides management services of cyber charter schools. So the cyber charter schools themselves are established as a nonprofit, but then they hire K-12 to run their program for them. So they write K-12 a check every month for the students in their program. It's really interesting. We hear outrage in the public about the cost of teacher salaries, about the cost of administrators. We've even heard plenty of condemnation of the amount we pay our superintendent. But I've not heard one word from anyone, anywhere in the public about the salary of the CEO of K-12 Inc. His salary is paid for exclusively by taxpayer dollars, funneled through nonprofits to a for-profit entity. He makes $5 million per year. Where's the outrage? People get upset about the superintendent who makes a fraction of that, and yet no peep about the obscene amount of money that's being made by a CEO of a publicly traded company who's benefiting from taxpayer dollars. I heard a radio advertisement this afternoon on my way home from work for K-12 Inc. And I thought, our tax dollars are paying for that advertising. I get mailers from Agora, from K-12 at home. My tax dollars go towards paying for all of that marketing, all of that advertising. Yet there's no outrage anywhere about how our taxpayer dollars are going into these entities and enriching some people very greatly who own stock in those publicly traded companies or who are in the senior ranks. Thank you.
Well, I certainly am hopeful that through some litigation that these companies are made to open their books so that everyone can see the total cost of what they're taking from cybers. And again, as Mr. Earnshaw said, charter schools are supposed to be nonprofit, but when they sign a management agreement with a for-profit company, that's when things get a little murky. Okay, let me move on to good news. Through the hard efforts of Mr. Glancy, Mrs. Sertibal, and Jim Frank, our assistant business manager, and through the help of PFM, I'm pleased to tell you tonight that a total of $1,250,294.31 is being returned to this district. I'm excited about that. And so those are the projects that are listed for you. Some of these, as you noticed, Shoemaker School. We went back and we did a lot of research the last couple of years and examined what Plan Con Js, which are the capitulation of the Plan Con process. Send those in, you either pay or you get money back. In the case of Shoemaker, we owed $24,000. But look at the funds we got back. And so this money is coming to us free and clear. There are no restrictions on how we can use this money. So being totally transparent, the board has options. And this, I would think, should be part of our discussion in May. You can certainly use that $1.2 million for tax reduction if that's what you want to do. You can put the funds into a fund balance. You can mix it with all the other fund balances. Or, as we heard from Mr. Gorman when he did his presentation, you could set up a committed fund balance, and some of the things we might recommend would certainly be for PSERS. I've asked Mr. Sertibal to do a little scan of what might be our liability for next year's budget. Appears it might be about $1.3 million. Miraculously, that number we're getting back is $1.2 million. One could say that we could deal with that increase next year very comfortably. However, the board has options. And so I would think that should be part of our discussion when we talk about the budget, what you want to do with that $1.2 million.
One of the things that we need to point out is these are one-time monies, again. So they should be thought of as being used for one-time applications because they're not a continuous revenue stream. We won't have that $1.2 million next year.
But it's there. And we want to be transparent. The other thing, recently Mrs. Serval and Mr. Glancy had an excellent meeting with Scott Shear from PFM, and it appears that we might be able to have another successful refinancing. However, and again, I want to be honest up front with you. We don't know if this will come to fruition. I mean, right now, if we ran the sale today, the numbers would go really good. And I certainly don't want to be accused a month or 2 or 3 months from now saying, why didn't you accommodate this, or why didn't you anticipate this and put it in the budget this year? We're not recommending that because, as you've heard Mr. Shear say over and over again, the market is volatile. What looks promising today could be not so promising tomorrow. But my intent tonight is to tell you that I think if we had a crystal ball, if we had our hands looking over the horizon, that things look good for another bond sale. And that is with the board's minimum expectation of clearing $250,000 in the transaction. So that is coming down the line. And I want to let you know that. Mr. Shear will be here, I think our, Mrs. Serval, June?
Yes.
Can't see you.
Yes, that's correct, Jim.
You're blocked. June 12th board meeting to talk about that with you. And of course, at June 12th, you know, some people, you knew about this ahead of time. No, we're telling you tonight that we think there's going to be an opportunity. And again, the good news is, if we're able to have a sale, then we can certainly lower our debt service, our local government debt service, at least in the 2013-2014 budget. So I'm reluctant to put any anticipated proceeds from the bond refinancing in the 2012-2013 budget. Any questions on those two things?
Well, I will point out that if we have a bond sale on the 12th, we won't realize the revenue until sometime in August.
Well, that's exactly right. The settlement won't be until August.
So that we're really anticipating something we haven't gotten in hand. If we attempt to change the budget before June 30th to accommodate that. Mr. Bacher.
I don't recall seeing a holiday that was until the end of the year. Would this be something that we'd be...
November, we're allowed to settle a certain time period.
Would this be something that we'd have to escrow the funds and, you know, it would just be...
What we're trying to avoid is someone 3 months from now saying, you guys, you knew you were going to have a bond refinance. So we're telling you now, we think we're going to be able. I think it's a series, some bonds from 2007, 2008. And we're just telling you right now, because I never want to be accused of saying, well, you knew you were going to get this money and you didn't use it. We had a good opportunity, but I would be reluctant to gamble and throw the dice in this budget coming up.
So, just to be clear, it's a November bond sale. You're just talking about it early.
But
Yes.
we can actually settle in August. But we can't settle until August. Which means it's not in this.
He's going to be talking about the
June 12th.
June 12th.
Right.
That's probably the earliest he can talk about it because there's also some front-end timing things you can't be going out to advertise something you can't do until a certain period.
I just want to finish by saying certainly board members are always welcome to ask us questions. Our policy is if someone asks us a question, we'll give the full board the information. So, okay, Mr. Ballard.
Right now, Dr. Seidenberger, what direction, if any, or advice do you need from the board to continue your work on the budget?
None. We're going to do our job. We're going to present to you as Mr. Serval and Mr. Clancy and I are going to probably conclude our internal discussions make a decision within the next week or 10 days, and then we'll be printing up the documents, and you'll see it before the board meeting, I can tell you that.
Okay, but I want to understand the timing because we only have one board meeting in May. So that means you have to give us the preliminary proposed final budget on the May 12th meeting. And that would be the proposal that we have to agree to, including any direction on eventual tax rate for the proposed preliminary budget. And if there's any desire on the board's part to give you any direction on the way that proposed preliminary budget is to proceed, I want to know, how we get that to you or when we have to get that to you.
We have a discussion tonight, or people can forward me their concerns.
Okay. What is the board's feeling on that subject? The proposed final budget is not the final budget. It can be changed between May 12th and June 30th at any time, but it has to be out for at least 30 days before we approve the final budget. But it is the first real cut that you're going to have at direction to the superintendent and his administrative staff on what the rough final number will look like, the kind of number it will look like. So the question is, do we have any preliminary direction that board as a whole wants to give the administration at this point for that proposed final budget? Well, I'm not hearing anything. So, aside from questions that you might be able to forward to the superintendent for the administration to consider, that means we're going to get the administration's proposed final budget on May 12th and have to vote on it as whatever preliminary tax rate or whatever preliminary expenditure value that's going to be. Now, again, it can be changed after that, but that's going to be something that's going to be out there. So you have to understand that. If there's any direction from the board as how the superintendent should proceed, we need to give it now. Mr. Bacher.
I just have a question. You say, when will we be getting the updated information?
As soon as we feel comfortable making some internal cuts. I mean, obviously, and I would echo what Mr. Ballard said, I think we'll probably see some changes from May to June, only because I don't think in 3 weeks' time are we going to have a final resolution on the state budget. I'm encouraged enough through our conversations and when I read in the paper that there is some pushback in the governor's budget. But again, if you read some papers, ABG grant. If I talk to some other folks, there's going to be something done on cyber schools. I don't know. Anything is welcome. What I'm trying to present tonight is anything is the difference between doing something really good in the budget and making some additional cuts.
What I was looking for is, I'm assuming we're going to get this revision before the Thursday, before the next meeting. I was just curious.
You said before the Thursday or the Thursday before?
Well, we get a packet the Thursday before the meeting. I'm assuming we'll get some information before then, or are we going to have?
We're going to try to get to you as early as possible.
Okay.
Mrs. Donches.
I would guess, I'm not sure of the formality. As you know, I encourage a 0% or a flat budget. No cuts if possible, of course. It looks like there's a lot of good news here. Could I make a motion that the board ask for a 0% increase?
Second. You can ask, and it apparently has been seconded. Now we will have discussion on whether to direct the superintendent to come forth with a 0% increase budget along with the list of cuts that would be necessary to accomplish that. Mr. Earnshaw.
I see from the materials that we got, if I'm interpreting them correctly, that to get to a 0 increase, we would need to either find $1.985 million in new revenue or eliminate $1.985 million in expenses or some combination of the two. Am I
That's
reading
about
that
right.
correctly? So we've got to find almost $2 million in revenues and cuts, additional revenues and cuts to the expenditures. That's a pretty steep amount. So I'd like to hear proposals. If we were to eliminate teaching positions to get nearly $2 million, that sounds to me like about 25 teaching positions. So if we want to have 36 to 38 students in an elementary school class, we could do that. We want to eliminate programs, we can talk about that. I'd like to hear some specifics, though, on how you think we can get there. I'm, at this point, as much in the dark as anyone else on what the legislature is doing on the budget. That, to me, is a huge question mark at this point. I certainly hope that we'll get some better guidance from the legislature about what their intentions are between now and May 12th. But since we don't even have a representative in the House, for me personally, I'm not sure who to talk to at this point. It's taxation without representation in a certain sense. So we've got a lot of question marks. There is always a possibility, unlikely, but a possibility the legislature could come back with further cuts to education. They could come back with some addition, they could restore some funding that's been cut from the governor's budget. They could juggle the numbers so the total dollars go up with less coming to East Penn and more going to districts like Allentown or Reading or Philadelphia. So I'm really mystified where we're going to come up with $2 million in cuts. We could eliminate the entire athletics program, all extracurricular athletics at all levels, and that would only get us halfway there. So I'd love to hear some suggestions on what programs we should cut in order to eliminate $2 million worth of expenses. I'd love to see a 0% increase too. I just don't know where to get it from.
Thank you, Mr. Earnshaw. Mr. Stoltz?
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. I'm personally sick to death of hearing government officials at every level claim that the second we ask for a 0% tax increase, we're talking about cutting proverbial firefighters and policemen. We're talking about less than 2% of the budget. I believe that we could probably do that without eliminating 25 teachers or cutting the entire athletics department or drama department or what have you. I would like to see the administration prepare just a scenario where it happens. We can take it or leave it, but we at least will have an idea from the administration as to what a 0% increase would look like. As the PSBA is so wants to remind us, it's not the school director's job to count the meatballs. That's the job of the administration. So what Ms. Donchez and I believe are suggesting with our motion is we are giving direction to the administration to prepare a budget and let them count all the meatballs and tell us what a 0% would look like.
Ms. Hyde?
I just want to understand this motion. Is this motion that we would only receive a 0% or would we still receive an additional one that Mr. Duvall would put together with what we talked about this evening? So I just want to make sure I understand that there would be two budgets in place with this resolution. Am I understanding this?
Could we have an explanation, Ms.?
If I need to amend my motion to make it yes, I'd like to see the 0% in addition to whatever the administration would like to present. I'd like to see that 0% as an option.
Yes, that was also my intention.
So as I understand it now, we're talking about the request that the board would be requesting to have two budgets presented, one showing a tax increase as proposed by the administration, and the other would be a 0% tax increase budget and what it would be necessary to cut to produce that. Is that everybody's understanding of what the motion is? Do we have any further discussion?
Thank you for clearing that up.
Mr. Bacher?
I have a question. Mr. Stoltz mentioned we're not talking about cutting programs and teachers. Are you saying that you want a 0% budget that doesn't cut programs or teachers? And I don't know if that's possible, or do you want a budget, what would we have to cut? What programs would we have to cut to get a 0%?
Mr. Bacher, as the PSBA likes to remind me, it's not my job to count the meatballs. I want the administration's recommendation as to what a 0%.
I'm not asking for you to suggest cuts. I'm asking, are you requesting that the superintendent develops a budget without regard to educational quality? Or are you requesting him
I would expect
to have a
Please
standard?
address the chair, and both of you, okay? We're going to try to finish your statement, Mr. Bacher, and then I'll ask Mr. Stoltz to respond.
So my clarification is just, are we asking, is the budget, is the resolution for the administration to prepare a budget without regard to educational quality and to see what would need to be cut there? Or are we asking the administration to specifically not cut educational programs and to balance and to give a 0% budget increase? It's just a question of clarification, what we're asking the administration to accomplish with this other budget.
Mr. Stoltz, do you have a response to that?
Yes, I believe that it's the administration's job to care about the quality of education, so I would expect that any budget, be it 0% increase or otherwise, would take educational quality into account. Okay? And if not, the administration should be fired. No offense, Dr. Steinberger.
Are there other comments from people who have not made a comment so far? Well, then we'll go back to Mr. Earnshaw.
All right, once again, the job of the school director is to set the direction for the district. That means if we think that a 0% budget is what's desirable in our district, then we need, and we think it can be achieved, then we need to give the superintendent and his staff some direction on where to look. And if you think that there's $2 million in here that's complete waste, you know, in other words, we could eliminate those expenditures with no impact whatsoever on any programs we deliver, then I want to hear where you think the waste is. If there's no waste in the budget, then the only way you can eliminate spending is by eliminating programs. So if there's $2 million in waste and you think there is, tell us what parts of the budget you want them to look at. Do you want them to look at the technology budget, at the transportation budget, at the elementary education level? If you don't have a feeling that there's $2 million in waste, then tell us what programs you think are less priority that we should eliminate. That's the point I'm trying to get across. If the administration thought there was $2 million in waste, I suspect we would have had it gone a long time ago. We've eliminated, is it 4 administrative positions over the last 5 years, or is it 5 administrative? I can't keep track.
I'd have to go back and look at my records.
We've eliminated administrators, we've reduced expenditures on a number of different areas, we've reduced field trip expenses, we've deliberately increased class sizes, which has decreased the quality of the programs at all levels. We've eliminated elective classes at the high school that had fewer than 10 students taking them. So tell me, you know, I don't know where else to look. I'd like to hear some ideas where you think there's waste or where you think there are unnecessary programs. That's all I'm asking. And if you can't identify any of them, then you're weaseling out saying, well, it's somebody else's job to find that.
I think Mr. Bacher was next.
Yeah. Again, I just want to clarify what we're asking the administration to do. I'm not saying the administration would just take the first $1.9 million of items off the budget and cut them, but perhaps it's a different way of phrasing what's being said. I believe that that would have an impact on education. And I'm just clarifying, are we putting a line in the sand that we're not going to cut into educational programs? Or are we saying, even if it has to impact educational programs, we want the administration to come up with a 0% increase? That's all I'm asking. Just, what are we requesting the administration to do? What direction are we giving them?
Ms. Sanchez.
I'll just echo Mr. Stoltz's remarks that educational foundation is of utmost importance. However, we were just handed extra budget items tonight, and there is a listing of consideration for cuts, and they're listed here. So I would, have those among in answer to Mr. Earnshaw's question. Here is a list of places that is already considering to be cut, as well as the plan con money. So those are, that's what I'll offer for now, and I think the rest of the administration.
See, Mr. Stoltz?
I would ask if the administration thinks that our direction was clear enough with the motion.
I have a good idea, but I will say this for the record tonight, that to cut $2 million is going to equate with some pain.
We're only asking that you show us what it looks like. Sure. And go from there.
Well, we haven't asked him yet. We have to.
That's what the motion is.
I just want to remind, continuing with Mr. Earnshaw's comments, things that, I remind you, things that we were able to do last year that we simply cannot do this year, like remove 12 teaching members from the staff. 12 times $70,000 is a lot of money. Okay, we were able to do those kind of things last year. I don't know if we're in the position to make personnel cuts, and I'm certainly not going to put that in a budget to be a bonus or a scare tactic. I don't behave like that, and I think you know that. But
I believe we cannot reduce teaching staff
anyway
for present contract situations. Right? Are there other people?
I believe that technically speaking, I still have the floor, but I let Dr. Seidenberger go anyway. With that, I think I've had enough grandstanding, and I would move to end debate and call the question.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. We must take a vote. A 2/3 majority must vote to end debate. It is not debatable. An aye vote on this motion to end debate will end debate. That is what you're attempting to do. So if you want to end debate, vote aye when Ms. Birdsall calls the roll. Ms. Birdsall.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rose.
No.
Ms. Donchez.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Politano.
Aye.
Mr. Bacher.
No.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde.
No.
Mr. Ballard.
No. And I do have to say that selfishly because I didn't get a chance to speak. We'll see now. Is there anyone else who wishes to say
Well,
anything?
we haven't finished the roll call.
5 ayes and 4 nays.
That is not 2/3. You need 6-3. Ms.
Well,
Fuller?
yes, I raised my hand prior to the call to question, but having sat at this table for more than a decade, I've come to value the recommendations of this administration, and particularly to see all of the effort that has gone into this budget with the recommendations for decreased spending. We have seen spending decrease. Last year, we had a decreased budget over the previous year. So I think to ask for 2 budgets is asking an awful lot of the resources, of the time of the staff to come up with a program that really would give us a substandard education, in my opinion. It is disingenuous to say, preserve the asset, preserve the value, but don't make me pay for it. We live, unfortunately, in a society where gas prices are rising, where electric prices are rising. Medical costs are probably increasing. We know that our pension costs are increasing. And with those fixed costs increasing, I truly don't know where we would get the $2 million. As a taxpayer in this district for many years, if I vote to increase taxes, I am voting to increase my own tax. And I'm in a position now where I don't receive direct benefit from an East Penn education as my sons have graduated from the school district. But I believe that we must reserve the value of what we offer for the benefit of children coming through the system and for our enlightened self-interest, because an educated electorate is what we need to move the society forward. So I would like the administration to give us their best estimate in the face of all of the uncertainties of what the state has not told us, as to give us their best estimate of a budget. I would be very happy to see that.
Ms. Hyde.
Just going to quickly state that I really appreciate what the administration has done, and as Mr. Glancy knows, I'm really looking for just at the index. It's very hard for me to swallow a 0% because I agree with everybody at this table, but I don't see what harm it would do, and I understand that it takes time, but I think it would be interesting and knowledgeable for all of us to see some other things that administration might come up with, because I never would have known anything about the automated call system, for example. So I'm curious, and I'm for this. Like I said, I'm going to have a hard time swallowing it 0%, but I think it's good for us to look at both of these and see if there's any additional costs that we might be able to, cuts we might be able to do. So thank you.
Okay, I will now make my comments. I knew this issue would come up, so I thought we'd better get it taken care of because of the timing we have. We have to have a preliminary budget in 3 weeks. We have to be able to get our staff to produce that budget, and there are several phrases that could be used. Most of them are sports related and don't go well in mixed company about how hard they're working to get this budget done. And so they don't have a lot of time to mess around and ratchet around between various things that people might want. So we need to give them definitive direction, and I wanted to make sure that they had it. I also think that not telling the administration the areas that we would propose be cut or that we would support cutting beforehand. It's one thing to say support the educational programs, but if it's your educational program that gets cut and you come back and say, no, we can't cut that, that's being disingenuous with the administration trying to do some kind of cuts. And $1.9 million, $2 million is going to be severely impacting. I would remind everybody that last year, for the first year in the history of East Penn that I know of, and going back with a whole lot of other employees who worked in finance, some of whom are retired, it was the only one that they could remember. We had a budget that spent less than the previous year. So we have already made some significant types of cuts in our expenditures last year, the year we're operating now. And to think that there's more of those kind of things available is probably very, very wishful thinking. So I will not be supporting this motion. And now that we've had our discussion on it and seeing no more discussion on it, Ms. Birdsall, will you call the roll on this motion to request the administration to prepare 2 budgets, a 0% increase and the administration's recommended increase?
Mr. Earnshaw.
Nay.
Mr. Rhodes.
Nay.
Ms. Donchez.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
No.
Mr. Politano.
Aye.
Mr. Bacher.
No.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
No.
5 nays, 4 ayes.
Okay. So we have that now.
Mr. Ballard, the comments from the board out like that's unprofessional and not in the proper decorum. Mr. Stoltz, if you have a comment, great. Be recognized by the chair, and let's get it. Let's not make snide comments.
Well, let's all be professional here and just hold on to this, because we're going to have a small other discussion. Because in addition to the budget discussion, we need to have a discussion about requests for information about the budget. Because I have received personally complaints about requests that have been received that have been taxing the employees and the administration beyond their normal ability to respond, and that this is a political issue that our administration should not have to deal with. We have to deal with it because I'm going to try to explain something to people that may have been perhaps overlooked. The employees of this district are employed by an entity called the East Penn School District. That entity is headed by Dr. Seidenberger as the Chief Administrative Officer, and Dr. Seidenberger is hired by the board to administer the district, and the board sets policy for the district. And that is not an employer-employee relationship that the board has with the employees of the district. That is a oversight and policy direction that the board has. And it would be entirely within Dr. Seidenberger's and the employees of this district's rights to not respond to requests for information from members of the board except as directed by the entire board of directors. Because that is the legal position of any individual board member on this board. That is, you have no authority to question, direct, or otherwise interfere with the operation of the district. I have here an excerpt from the training from the Pennsylvania School Boards Association, complete with the legal citations for the powers and roles of the individual school director. And as you will note, the power is to make collective decisions through formal board action. As I said, this issue has come to me in the form of situations that our employees should not be being put through. And I think the board needs to decide what it wants to do in terms of the inevitable requests for information that are going to come as a result of these budget discussions right now. We have been provided a large amount of information from the administration, and in the past, when requests have been de minimis, that is something that could be answered in a couple of minutes without interrupting the work of the employees, it's been the occasion of the employees to respond to these requests and come forward. But quite frankly, we as individual board members have no more right than any other member of the public to demand information. Individually. The demands that can be enforced are the ones that are put forward by the board. And so we need to decide how we're going to proceed on requests for information because of these circumstances that have occurred. And I'm now going to ask you as individual board members to state your opinion on how we should proceed with additional requests for information on this budget beyond those being provided by the administration. And no particular order, we'll start with you, Mr. Bodger.
I support continuing the policy of de minimis requests to be answered. I think if there's something substantial, I think we should come from the whole board.
Ms. Hyde?
Oh geez, I don't know. I
hope my behavior wasn't offending to anybody.
We're not singling out any person.
I know, but I'm kind of in shock where it's coming from in the sense of, are you looking for us not to direct questions to the administration?
No,
Or are you looking for us to
that's
bring
not
it?
it. There have been direct requests for information that have exceeded many pages, have required staff work to accumulate and so forth. And we're, for example, it's hard to understand how having to provide the Section 125 sign-up plan and explanation is anything to do with the budget. And there have been other requests that have come, and like I said, these things have come from many different directions, and they need to be formalized because
Okay.
the natural reaction of a staff person when they are hit with these requests is to try to not annoy somebody who might cause them problems. And that is understandable, but it's not kosher under these circumstances because we literally have reduced staff in all of our areas and they're working harder than ever and they need to be concentrating on what the district pays them.
Okay, so on the smaller amounts, like I always have questions on our packet every 2 weeks. I always have
Forward
questions.
those to Ms. Birdsall and they're answered.
Correct. So that's the way I've been handling things, and if that's the way we can
That's the way we can do it.
then I'm fine with that.
Yeah, but it's also the content of them. The size of these things is getting out of hand is what it's amounting to.
Okay. I'm not sure if it's something that is going to be more material, then maybe as a board we should collectively talk about it.
That's the general direction.
Okay,
yes.
then I'm okay with that.
Ms. Sanchez.
If I may make a confession, it was I who asked for this outlandish information. I asked for two transportation reports that were noted in the transportation contract as being reports. So I would have thought, and I believe they were, already documents that existed. So they were just PDF files. I also asked for the medical 125. I was curious about that being new. I noted that the medical health insurance line was going up, and I was curious about if collective bargaining unit employees are paid to opt out of medical insurance, and that gave me insight into that. What else did I ask for? I asked for a listing of the charter schools and cyber charter schools and how many students were in them and how much money they cost the district, because there's a resolution to be discussed this evening, and we've already had quite a bit of discussion on the charter this evening. And I asked for the cell phone contract because I thought that, given last year, that could be another area where there perhaps could be more reductions, and I was curious to know how much we spend on those cell phones. Did I get them all? I would think, except as I learned that there wasn't a contract to be sent for the telecommunications, I believe that all of those other documents should exist. What I was confused about when I got the response was, do I have to submit these as right-to-know requests? Could I just put myself back in the audience again and wait the 5 days and get the information? I really don't feel that those requests were out of line, and I would be most appreciative if I could continue to ask for that information. As you can see, they are informing the decisions. I'm not, asking to cause more people work. I have made up many of my own spreadsheets from the information that I can gather before I ask for information. I only come if I really cannot get it together, being what is available already. So I would hope that we can continue to, and I like the idea that if I ask individually, that it gets shared with the whole board. I would like that. If somebody else asks, I trust. I mean, I was amazed to hear that when I asked for the detailed budget, that I was the first person in 38 years that had asked for that. So like I said, I couldn't imagine approving a budget without having more detail. So I really don't feel that I was out of line. There's a lot to learn. I certainly appreciate the depth and the breadth of all the information. And that's the explanation, and I would like to continue to be able to ask for what it is that's needed to make these informed decisions.
Ms. Fuller.
In my experience, when I've had a need for information, the request has been expedited quickly. It's typically, as Ms. Hyde says, in response to something that is part of the board packet. Maybe it's an agreement I don't understand. Maybe there's some background I'm looking for. I have not looked for years of information to be compiled, but I guess I may have some of that at my fingertips, having been on the board for a while.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Over the years, I've never had an issue with getting an answer to a question on a motion. If I've asked for background information, for a rationale, I've always gotten it. And I think those are wholly appropriate questions to ask when there's a motion before the board. For documents that exist, I don't think there's any issue with requesting them. When I saw in our packet the compiled data on cyber charter and brick and mortar charter schools with the cost breakdowns, with the number of students, I thought, I don't think this document existed. I suspect staff had to sit down and put it together. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it already existed. Did it exist already? Or did they have to compile this multi-page?
That changes all the time. We have a template that we add to it all.
Okay. So it does exist already?
Yes.
All right, so that's not a problem. As far as asking for special data to be compiled, I would be completely opposed to that. You know, if I decided I wanted to see a breakdown of some data some way, I think it would be inappropriate for me to ask for that. For the question about the detailed budget breakdown, I've thought about that quite a bit. What would I do with that information? So if I got it down to the very minutest level of detail and saw that the student budget at Lincoln was less than the student budget at Jefferson, what would I do with that information? Well, I could ask a question, why is it lower at one school than the other? Well, the obvious question is there are different numbers of students. So then I could pull out my calculator, pull out my enrollment reports, and do the math and say, wow, the dollars per student in this particular category is different at Lincoln than at Jefferson. Why is that? Well, if I'm asking questions like that, what I'm saying is I don't believe that the administrators of those schools understand the needs of their students well enough to allocate their building budgets appropriately. Well, I'm not an educator. I don't work in those buildings. I don't know the students. I'm not in a position to make a judgment that X dollars per student in Lincoln, X plus 10% in Jefferson in some minor budget category is appropriate or not. I've found the more details I get, the less answers I have about directionally the decisions I need to make. When I get a spreadsheet at work that's got 3,000 rows, the first thing I do is put it into a pivot table and summarize it at a higher level so I can start understanding trends and directions. I think the budget documents that we have do a great job of giving us an appropriate level of detail for a school director to make decisions about the programs and the policies and the direction of the district. And that additional information is certainly available at more detailed levels within the budget documents And then if I had a specific question about one of those, what kinds of costs go into this budget, I'm sure I could, with a 5-minute conversation with the superintendent, get an answer to that. So I fully support the minimus question and answer. I think that's wholly appropriate. I'm completely opposed to dedicating staff time to compiling records that don't exist. And I think it's inappropriate for a school director to take a budget, a 3,800 line item budget, and try to make some kind of inferences about the spending direction based on that. I think the answers that one would get would be invalid and would need hundreds of hours of questions to understand the rationale behind every decision made at much lower levels in the organization than at the top. So I would be completely opposed to that. Thanks.
Mr. Rhodes.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. I understand the desire and the need of new board members to find out as much as they can, as quickly as they can, especially with their first budget rounds. I can remember trying to find out what all the categories were and trying to just get a handle on the big picture. And it took me about 2 years, and I had trouble getting the information I wanted. This was a different school district. And once I got the categories lined up and I started seeing how they were intertwined with each other, then I realized that to do my job, I need to back away from those numbers. But until I got to that point, I was always asking for information. I've always found this school district to be transparent, responsive. I've never been turned down for any information I asked for. I am more than happy to say that I'm pleased with what this school district is doing, what the administration is doing. I trust this administration to come up with a reasonable budget in an unreasonable time. I'm not going to ask for any more information than they give me unless I find a smoking gun somewhere. Once again, I want to reiterate that I truly understand trying to find the information so that you're comfortable with the decision, but also try to understand that we have people working for us who are working very hard, and there's only so many hours in the day. I am not going to ask for anything outside of what I'm being given at this time unless something untoward shows up at my door. Thank you.
Mr. Falcao.
For the most part, what I submitted hasn't been for large things, except I did request a detailed breakdown. But other than that, most of the questions are ones that can be easily responded to with existing information and email. Particularly, I'm always interested in the latest revenue budget comparisons. Like we didn't have that today. For the most part, it's been not having any problems. Except maybe sometimes it took a little longer to get to the spots. But most of the time it's been pretty quick. The last questions I had, responses were very quick. And I don't think it took too much time.
Mr. Stoll.
For my part, I don't think that any of the requests that I heard that Ms. Donchez made were unreasonable. In fact, I think that they went a long way towards, and I'm sure she feels this way, go a long way towards making some of the recommendations that Mr. Earnshaw and Mr. Bacher were asking for when it comes to areas to cut. I would think that a school director, or any other elected official for that matter, should be able to have access to any information that already exists. It doesn't sound like any requests were being made for new information. The one request that was made for a lot of new information, a new budget to it, was made in the form of a public motion. It failed, as I said. I wasn't too surprised. And I think it's interesting. You see this trend in government bodies. I remember this happened now and 10 a few years back, whenever there's a fiscal watchdog on board, somebody who asks for a lot of information and digs into it, the entrenched bureaucracy, the people who have been there for decades, tend to launch a public intimidation campaign. And I consider this little routine we're going through right now to be nothing but an attempt to intimidate Ms. Donchez into not making further requests, and I trust her to not stand for it. But they go out and they say, well, they're costing the taxpayers all of this money by asking for all of these items. I don't think that I believe that we're costing the taxpayers any more money than an increase in their taxes every year is already costing them. In fact, I would venture to guess that any money that may have been spent to generate Ms. Donchez's request doesn't even so much as account for a rounding error in our $120+ million budget. And I think that a school director has the right to get any information that already exists without receiving, what's the word Mr. Earnshaw used? Oh yes, snide remarks. And I would actually ask Mr. Ballard, what would the process be if a member of the public requested this information?
The member of the public would file a right-to-know request. There would be 5 days in which to respond to that right-to-know request, 5 business days. If the information was immediately available, it should be provided at that time. If it's not immediately available, it can take up to 30 days to be processed and made available at a copying charge of up to 25 cents per page.
Okay, I just wanted to have that on the record. I think I've had my say.
All right. Here is something that I think has bearing on this whole discussion. I came across an organization called Leadership for Liberty. And it's my understanding that there's at least one school director who's associated with that organization. In particular, I call to your attention to an article called East Penn School District, We Just Yes. And here is where part of my concern comes from. This article goes on about, for some reason, the East Penn School District budget. And it says, most of the problems we face as a society are due to a very simple factor, the laziness of politicians. This laziness either results from a lack of intellectual curiosity, a dereliction of duty, or simply believing in various myths and mantras that have infected political discourse. And these afflictions affect politicians of both parties and those at any part of the political spectrum. There are fiscal conservatives who think it is simply enough to oppose tax hikes, and there are liberals who truly believe spending more money is good. But these politicians are guilty of political laziness. Recently elected East Penn School Board Director Lynn Donchez offers true reformers hope. At an East Penn School Board meeting, Director Donchez asked for some common sense budget information. You can see the video here, and the questions start at 24:40. She basically asked for 2 breakdowns of budget information. One which would show mandated, contracted, and discretionary costs. Ever notice how school boards and administrations always complain about the expense of mandates? Well, Mrs. Donchez simply asked for a breakdown of these costs. What was the typical response? Superintendent Seidenberger relayed that such an effort would be difficult and that they will do the best they can. But how can you complain about costs if you do not identify them? School Director Earnshaw also chimed in that such an effort would be a waste of staff time. Is Mr. Earnshaw admitting that they do not track such costs? Any business and most households can easily make such budget determinations, yet a governing body that administers $120 million of taxpayer money does not. Superintendent Seidenberger explained that Director Donchez can spend time with the staff to get the answers to her questions, but this is a standard technique. First, governing bureaucrats hope, usually correctly, that such an offer will not be taken. Second, by doing such things privately, people can be educated, it's in quotes, about reality, in quotes, or guided, in quotes, to the proper conclusions. But we, as limited government activists, have to ask a simpler question. Why is such a process not routinely performed, and why are the findings not public? At Leadership for Liberty, we have a simple solution. If the school board is not interested in such information and the administration is incapable of performing such an analysis or considers it a waste of time, we, the people, will do it ourselves. With the help of leaders like Director Donchez, such an effort is very possible and achievable. Director Donchez also asked that the budget be presented, as state law requires, in the format mandated by the Pennsylvania Department of Education Chart of Accounts. Such a format presents a great level of detail. However, detail, information, creates accountability, something the governing class avoids at all costs. Such an examination would also raise questions and create work, so we can also get back to the laziness factor. Director Earnshaw also declared that the preliminary budget was a wild guess, in quotes. That should make taxpayers feel secure. Also, at a spring primary debate in 2011, then candidate Donchez and other reformer candidates mentioned that detailed budgets should be presented to the school board and the public. After the event, Director Earnshaw told one of the candidates that such budget details were unnecessary. In fact, he further relayed that his employer, Fortune 500 company Air Products and Chemicals Inc., never had detailed budgets. How can that even be true? Was this laziness on his part or intentional misdirection? Does APCI utilize, quote, wild guess, unquote, budgets without any details? I wonder what his bosses would say, or better yet, the stockholders. Director Donchez also asked the superintendent to prepare a zero tax hike budget for consideration. Board President Ballard piped in by arguing that such a request was not appropriate, nor was it his job. However, as an employee of the school board, which a superintendent is, though too many directors and superintendents forget this important fact, why would such a request be inappropriate? Board President Ballard made it very clear that the board would have to make the hard decisions. When has that ever happened in the East Penn School Board after a decade of incessant tax hikes? Congratulations to Director Donchez for being a leader for liberty. We know that she is diligently doing her homework as an elected official and that she will indeed provide some budget alternatives. It has also been relayed to me that at last night's board meeting, Director Donchez reimbursed the school district for the fee to attend the Pennsylvania School Board Association training session. She did not want taxpayers to pay for it. Apparently, certain school board directors were not happy with the gesture since it was, quote, already paid for, unquote, and the board secretary was, quote, disappointed, unquote, in Director Donchez. See, the sense of entitlement and wasting other people's money does not only afflict Washington politicians and bureaucrats, it afflicts almost all politicians and bureaucrats everywhere. I hope when budget alternatives are offered, Board President Ballard will congratulate Director Donchez for her leadership and support any effort to make hard decisions, in quotes. Though in reality, a host of common sense spending cuts can be made in any school district without any impact on education. And I hope Director Earnshaw learns that detailed budgets do in fact exist and that they can and should be scrutinized. Then he might realize that you don't have to eliminate, quote, third grade, unquote, to avoid yet another tax hike, which was the example he used during this meeting. And it's my understanding that there is an organization, a pseudo-organization, the Pennsylvania School Board Coalition, which is being formed supposedly with the assistance of interested taxpayers and school board directors. So, put together with the things that I received independent of this, I am very concerned that what we have is a political situation, not a informational situation. And that's why I brought the subject up. This board needs to decide what's our policy on major information requests, because this has come up time and time again, most recently. And there are many boards who operate that only information requests that are approved by the board get sent out to the board. And we can continue to do it that way, or we can continue to trust to the goodwill and honest intentions of everyone involved, and continue as we were, with the understanding that right now we are in an extremely crucial time period for our employees, and we have to be reasonable. So we can continue the discussion at this point with anybody who wants to say anything. Mr. Stoltz.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. Two points. Speaking of board policies, I understand that we have a no bullying policy. Is that correct?
We have a what?
The school district has a no bullying policy.
That's correct, Mr. Stoltz.
I would then question why we're trying to bully one of our board members into not asking further questions. The second question I have, if I may, and I'll have to address this to you so that I may address it to Ms. Sanchez, is are the questions and information you're asking, are they for your own personal use or are they for Leadership for Liberty? I, for one, am willing to take Ms. Sanchez at her word.
Ms. Sanchez, would you care to answer that?
Gladly. They are for my own personal use. I'm somewhat astonished that conclusions are being jumped to. I'm sorry to know that, but I am not passing all these documents to Leadership for Liberty. They're for my own use and analysis.
And so none of this information is being gathered for Leadership for Liberty. Mr. Earnshaw.
I've been taken out of context before. I've been misquoted before. That's interesting. Did the person who wrote this particular piece, was it attributed to an author?
Yes.
Can I ask who it was?
It was to a Mr. Joe Hilliard.
No surprise there. A man with an agenda who has routinely taken me out of context. It's interesting that he didn't continue the quote where I mentioned that many of our expenses fall into multiple categories. For example, which I'll bring up for probably the third or fourth time, teacher salaries are both mandated and contracted. We're mandated to offer the third grade, for example, and yet those salaries are under contract. We're also mandated to withhold taxes, to pay workers' compensation, to pay unemployment compensation. Those are mandated expenses. I don't believe we've ever made an attempt to break those down and try to separate them out. And I would certainly oppose trying to reclassify every expense. One would have to look at the salary of every employee, calculate the mandated cost of the PSERS, the mandated cost of workers' comp, it would be an exercise that would consume hundreds and hundreds of hours of staff time to try to isolate that, and then the numbers wouldn't add up. Because every penny paid to that teacher in salary is both mandated and contracted. So once again, I would oppose the creation of documents at that level of detail that does not exist today.
Other comments? Mr. Bacher.
Just for clarification, I think we would all agree that if a document exists, that it should be shared and that would be considered de minimis. I'm assuming the document exists that you want access to and it's public, it's available to the public. I think we're talking about actions that take someone in the administration significant time to collate or to gather, to put it in a form. That's just a question I'm asking. That was my assumption. I didn't. When I answered,
probably be my assumption too.
When I answered originally, I didn't know who was asking who it was directed at or what the analysis was. But I'm assuming anything that's that's a public document that is already in the form, it doesn't take too much to. That would still be considered de minimis and would be offered for the member of the school board.
Well, I will only make one additional comment, and then if anybody wants to do anything further, we'll do that, but we'll go on with the rest of the agenda, because I don't sense a overwhelming resolution. But speaking about bullying is an attempt to, in a sense, bully the political conversation away from exposing political ramifications and political connections. And as we are elected officials, and as we are, in that sense, politicians, though I don't particularly care for the word involving school directors, we have political realities that we have to deal with, and we have to understand that that is all and should be out in the public light so it's fully understood. And I don't consider it to be bullying and won't consider it to be bullying. But if you want to see bullying, well, we'll talk about that later. So, threat, Mr. Ballard? No, it's just saying you don't really seem to understand what real bullying is. And as a person who suffered it as a kid, I can tell you about it. So, we'll go from there. Does anybody else have any further comments? Mr. Rhodes?
Yes, just an editorial comment. I'm a little distressed at the tenor of the discussions that are going on right now, and if I was a smarter man, I might consider this an ambush on a school board director. You know, if you pass this stuff out before the meeting, so we have a chance to look at it and think about it and comment on it, I'd be more comfortable with it. But none of us are without sin. I get that. We have a job to do here. If we're going to spend our time, I won't use that phrase, we're going to spend our time tit for tat, just going back and forth, we're not going to get our job done here. I wish we would just take a deep breath, back up, and let's continue this important debate about the budget. I hope nobody's trying to make points here, and if you are, please stop. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Rhodes. Ms. Hyde?
I totally agree with Mr. Rhodes. I think it's kind of getting ridiculous at this point. And I remember the first meeting we had here in our public forum, all together, our group here, and I think it was you who said, let's all just get along. All right, let's play nice in the sandbox. And I'm totally in agreement right now with Mr. Rhodes. Let's get our work done.
With that comment, let's move on to item 6.3, personnel.
Mr. Penn, may we bundle 6.4 and 6.5 with them?
We're going to ask we're going to withdraw item 5. There's a mistake, we need to correct it for next board meeting. Okay.
So it's items 6.3 and 6.4. Do I have that motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Wurzel, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Donches.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Politano.
Aye.
Mr. Bacher.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Other educational entities, Ms. Fuller?
As noted here, there were ballots for the election of CLI board members representing one director from each of the districts in charge of the high interviews. I'd like to mention that at the last meeting of the CLIU board, it's announced that the CLIU budget has been passed by all school districts.
All right, note that item 8 is a first reading of a policy. If anyone has any comments on the policy, please give them to the administration, or if you need to make them now, we can make them now. None appearing, please forward your comments to Ms. Wurzel on this first reading of the policy. We'll have the second reading of the policy at the next meeting. Legislative. For this item 1, there are 2 words that need to be inserted in the first paragraph in the last sentence. After the words based on, you insert the word what, and after the word would, you insert the word be. So it would read, whereas the current state of funding formula for regular and special education and charter and cyber charter schools bears no relationship to the actual instructional costs incurred by the charter schools, and is instead based on what the cost would be of educating the student in the district of residence. Mr. Bacher pointed out that English construction was not totally correct. Is there any comment? Let's get a motion, please.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any comment? Ms. Donches.
I have a question. I want to be clear. It sounds like we're bunching brick and mortar charter together with the cyber charter school. It seems to me that they would be 2 separate funding models. Would they? like this just is, it's talking about all charter and all cyber charter schools, and I hesitate to put them all together in one bundle. So do you have any indication as to whether, when they're talking about funding formula, is it just one formula, or might it be multiple formulas?
All of the formulas are flawed. You can have a student attending, let's suppose you have 25 students in a charter school class. You can literally have 25 different amounts of money that the charter school is receiving, either cyber or regular charter school, depending on what the sending district's cost of education is. And that works out, the cost of education should be the cost of education. There should be a number. So even for the brick and mortar charter schools, there's a funding formula problem. And it's worse with the cybers. Mr. Fokker.
I was going to comment. I originally had some issues the first time I read this, that I do see the reimbursement, the funding formula is the same for charter, bricks and mortar charters and cyber charters. And I see different issues with the funding formula for each. For the cyber charter, I think it's a little more clear based on information that Dr. Seidenberger presented that I'd seen before, that the school district is being asked to pay much more than the actual cost to educate a student in the cyber charter school. So I believe there's actual waste there in the way that's done. In the bricks and mortar case, I don't know if there's waste. In fact, I think, at least as evidenced by our local charter school, I think they are very tight on funds, and I don't know details about their funding, but I would be surprised if there was a lot of waste there. However, I can look at the budget of the school district and also see that the amount that's being transferred is more than the district saves. So even though it's a different issue with regard to bricks and mortar charter schools, I think there's still an issue with the funding formula, that while it's perhaps not enough for the bricks and mortar charter schools, or barely enough, it still is financially penalizing the school district. And I think it creates conflict. I think both Seven Gens and East Penn have communities of people that are deeply committed to public education, and it sometimes gets them at odds because of the inequitable state funding for the charter schools. And so even though I see different issues with cyber charter funding and bricks and mortar funding, I think it's something that the state needs to address, because I think in both cases there are problems.
And another, if I can take the time, another problem with the formula is that the amount that the state is actually contributing as part of that number that's going to the charter schools is different also for every district. In Allentown, 90% of the money is coming from the state in their payment, or some number like that. A very large part of the number is coming from the state allocation. Whereas in East Penn, a very small number of that money is coming from the state allocation, and the rest is being borne by local taxpayers. It ought to be uniform across the state. The state contribution ought to be the number that they think is appropriate for the charter school, and leave the district out of it. As Dr. Seidenberger has pointed out, if we just simply forgave the state money for those students, we'd come out way ahead on the total cost to the district, because we'd only be contributing about $2,800 instead of $8,800. Are there any other questions, comments? Ms. Birchall, will you call the roll, please?
I have a comment.
Oh.
I'm going to support this measure. I don't think that $2,800 would be enough to educate a student at a bricks and mortar charter school, and I think that's part of the problem with the funding. Is
should all come from the state.
It's easy for, in effect, the state to hide the cost of education by trying to put it in our budget.
Ms. Sanchez?
I just want to say that fundamentally, I agree that there should be funding formula changes. However, given the unsureness of the separation, I will vote against the resolution.
Any other comments? Ms. Birchall, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Ms. Donchez.
Nay.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Polacano.
Aye.
Mr. Barker.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
No.
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
7 ayes, 2 nays.
Does anybody have any objection to bundling 10.1 through 8?
So moved.
Second. Ms. Sanchez.
Split out 4 and 7. Same question about those.
Okay, amend the motion to split out, what'd you say, 4?
7.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
8 and 9. 5, 6, and 8.
5, 6, and 8. Yeah, okay, I see that too. All right. Any discussion on that part of the motion? Ms. Birdsall, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Polacano.
Aye.
Mr. Barker.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Ms. Donchez.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
9 ayes.
All right, that will take us to 10.4, appointment of the auditor. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Okay, discussion? Ms. Sanchez?
I was curious if this would be sent out to bid.
No.
It's professional.
I understand it doesn't have to
It's
be,
professional services, it doesn't have to be bid.
I understand it doesn't have to be, but could it be or should it be?
Could it be?
Yes, should it be? That's within the discretion of the board, but I would, if I were to recommend, I would highly recommend against that. Professional services, you're not comparing apples to oranges. You don't want to go necessarily with the bottom price.
Any other discussion? Ms. Birdsall, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Ms. Donchez.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller.
Aye.
Mr. Polacano.
Aye.
Mr. Barker.
Aye.
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde.
Aye.
Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
9 ayes.
10.9 is an information.
10.7.
10.7?
Need a motion.
10.7.
So
okay.
moved.
Second.
Discussion? Mr. Earnshaw?
I'd just like to express my appreciation for the nutrition group. Every year, they seem to return funds to us in a program that was nominally budgeted to break even, because they do an efficient job of using USDA foods and managing that operation very effectively, minimizing waste. They also provide so much extra for our district as far as educational programs for the students, the health fair that's coming up on Saturday. They've done a marvelous job for us, and I'm looking forward to continuing with them as our food service management company.
I'd like to echo Mr. Earnshaw's comments. It's so good to be able to point to a contractor that has done service to the district for a number of years and produced a good result for us. That it's just refreshing to be able to renew their contract. Any other comments, Ms. Sanchez?
I enjoyed learning about them through the newsletters that we get and all the new programs that they have for the kids. And it, I really, it looks like a really great group. But my question is, of course, do we give this out to other entities?
This is a very structured process through the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania Department of Education Food Service Division tells us step by step how we have to go through the process, how we have to advertise the process, how we have to interview all of the potential food service providers. And we did that a year ago. And now we have a 3-year contract that we can renew. So this is a renewal of that original contract. To do anything else, we would have to go through that whole process, and the state of Pennsylvania would want to know why. Because their expectation is that unless we have a major problem, we would renew it for the 3 years.
And in case anybody didn't hear that, we have a competitive type process that's done and monitored by the state of Pennsylvania for these things.
And we have to report.
And we've gone through that process for this contract. This is just a renewal of it in the 2nd year. Any other questions? First, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Stoltz.
Aye.
Mr. Barker.
Aye.
Mr. Polacco.
Aye.
Ms. Fuller. Ms. Donches.
Aye.
Mr. Rhodes.
Aye.
Mr. Earnshaw.
Aye.
Ms. Hyde. Mr. Ballard.
Aye.
9 ayes.
Okay, now we can get to 10.9, the informational salvage sale. Maybe we can get the Discovery Channel or something interested in school auctions or something like that. We can have
800 spoons.
people coming here, auction hunters maybe, something like that. But anyway, the public should take notice of this. It'll be advertised in accordance with the policies and the state regulations, so you'll know when we're going to hold the sale. There are a whole raft of announcements. I'll let you read them for yourself. There's a whole bunch of concerts. I urge everybody to go to their nearest one, or several if they can. They're all going to be good based on previous experience. Our next board meeting will be at 7:30 here on May 14th, and we had a clear session prior to this meeting for litigation, personnel, confidential, and negotiations. All right. Is there any new business to come before the board at this time? Mr. Stoltz.
This is just a quick one, and I did mention it to Dr. Seidberger beforehand, but I've been asked by some interested individuals, let's say, what the effect of, there's apparently a new possible housing development by Jankel in Lower Macungie Township, and the figures that I'm seeing floating around are 600 to 900 homes. I was wondering if we could get a look at whatever the administration's thoughts on this are and what possible financial impact it may have on the school district down the line with respect to school population. Sure. Thank you.
We generally get a periodic report on what the developments.
I received a special request, so I made it.
Any other? Entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?
Aye.